I think a lot of that probably will go into rural income inequality, agri, that kind of stuff,
Sure.
given what we have seen. So insofar as manufacturing is concerned, my view is that, again, it will go towards trying to see how we can drive employment up. So, can they flex some on 80JJAA, some inverted customs duty, this thing. And to be fair, I think we're seeing some early success in some parts, especially in the EMS side, in the defense sector, the semiconductor commitments, the entire energy transition manufacturing. I think companies are taking the first steps. It takes time. It takes 2 to 3 years before these things gain for momentum. As far as FDI is concerned, FDI is a factor of a lot of things. FDI is also a factor of what interest rate movements overseas are. And also a factor of what valuations in India are. So really there's not that much in the budget that they can do to this. But if interest rates start moderating outside, and a lot of the FDI blip that happened, if you actually analyze, was in the venture capital industry because you had massive flows coming through, which dried up. I think they may start picking up again. And as interest rates moderate, I think you may have more FDI coming through. And for the third thing, which is a longer bet, is for non-financial investors to identify big projects in India or to look at bigger acquisitions in India. It's still challenging.
It's still challenging.
So I think that it's not a budget issue, but
it's not a budget. It's a larger issue and a larger debate. It's also history for Nirmala Sitharaman, 7th consecutive budget. She surprised us with a 56-minute budget when the expectation was that the interim budget would be much longer. From a legacy perspective, is there anything that you believe that she's going to throw in this budget to really establish the historic significance of it?
I think what we have seen glimpses of that in the economic survey, and one of the things that started happening, if I may say, is building trust between different stakeholders in the economy. So trusting industry to be a livelihood generator or a creator of wealth. And therefore, that can play a huge role both in enabling private sector participation, as well as taking the common man ahead in terms of participating in the economy through increased consumption and greater employment. I think that's going to be a significant direction which really for the next 25 years.
In terms of direction, and the expectation is that the fiscal math is likely to be a continuation of what we saw in the interim budget, but perhaps a departure from things like privatization, perhaps a departure from things like strategic disinvestment, etc. I know that was part of the wish list, including a significant amount that you've pegged on asset monetization. Do you believe that there is appetite to see things like that, strategic disinvestment, privatization, or has industry tempered its expectations?
I think this is an area where I think industry has said that we should continue that path, and the government has also announced very clearly in the past a policy with respect to where they would stay invested and where they would not. We must recognize that there are challenges in doing this. These are not easy things to do, but I think the work on this should be on, and we should not lose focus on it, because these are, I think, important things to do.
Important things to do. So the baton being handed to industry. The question is now: are you ready to run? Vinayak Chatterjee?
I think industry is always ready to run, but the other thing that industry needs very clear directions on across the board is that the economy is transiting from a fossil fuel economy to a green economy, and this transition comes with a lot of pain, a lot of fiscal and financial pain to all the players. So I'm expecting the budget to discuss this issue, and one of the expectations is that one does have insider knowledge that a bunch of multilateral development banks have actually volunteered to set up a green energy transition fund with government participation to put all the other cesses like a compensatory afforestation, coal cess, and etc. into it, and probably make a 10-15 lakh crore green energy transition fund. That's certainly an expectation to help everybody transit, the nation to transit.
So 13 lakh crore rupee capex number and a green energy transition fund perhaps will find their way in the budget. We will know soon enough. 15 minutes to go for the Finance Minister to present the speech. Sanjeev Puri, Rajiv Memani, CB and Vinayak Bucketwala Chatterjee. Many thanks. for joining us here from the CII CNBC TV 18 Budget Headquarters. There's a lot more, guys. Back to you with the markets.
All right, Shireen, thank you very much for that. So all eyes, we are just about 40 minutes away from the big announcements coming through. The markets just around 50 odd points lower, so approaching the big event with some nerves, you can perhaps say that. Our next guest on the show is someone who, of course, looks at the market in great detail and has been looking at tax in perhaps greater detail in the last couple of weeks. Samir Arora, founder and fund manager at Helios Capital, is with us. Samir, I think you've been talking about this even before we got to the tax experts. Do not touch capital gains tax. Are you going to reiterate that? Is that your starting point today? What's the sense? About 20 minutes to go.
Now, I'm not reiterating because the budget would already have been made.
That's true.
But I think the tone and language in the economic survey was very bad. You know, we have a slide, and I guess many other India fund managers would have this slide that India is financialization is one of the big themes of India. We recently launched a fund, and that financialization goes into microfinance and small businesses and credit cards and mutual funds and insurance and whatever. And then for them to say that financialization also is bad, it's a new line that I've heard in my life in 30 years.
But Samir, hi, good morning, and thanks for joining us. I think you're in France, so thanks for the extra effort. And but
actually,
after what has
it's more fun to see it from far.
from far away, further away from Singapore. Now, so has the expectation after that mention in the economic survey of something coming gone up a little bit, Samir, in your mind?
I think nearly guaranteed now that something bad is going to happen because there are 2-3 places where they've mentioned the market, and I don't understand. The normal economic survey is to lead the government towards long-term future plans on how we should privatize, how we should reduce subsidies, whatever has been the historical thing that and you know, in the past, every time we remember, we used to get excited about the economic survey and then the government would not listen. So hopefully they don't listen or see it even this time. But the thing is 2-3 times to mention again and again. One is to say that the market cap of India to GDP is very high. These things make limited sense where even everybody in the world says that you are not supposed to have these kind of one-line indicators to talk about market, and the market is made up of bottom up this thing, and to come up with these simple one-liners that the market cap to GDP is high, or to say in an economic survey that speculation in India is high. What is speculation? If you open 3 casinos, the speculation would go there. So nobody says that the people going to a casino are very high in US or things like that. These are all our own creations. You can tune them, fine-tune them, tax them, stop these weekly settlements. You don't have to put them in the economic survey.
Right.
But the worst one is to say financialization has gone too far.
Samir, what is the...
It is one of our slides that it has just started 3-4 years ago.
Samir, what will do the least damage? What will do the most damage from a capital market taxation perspective? Because you're saying something is coming.
So my expectation now is, based on our discussion internally, just randomly, that what can they do and try and balance everything is that they change the tenure to 2 to 3 years of the short term, which will be very bad because that effectively would, and then change the tax by maybe 5% here or there, make it 15 or 20, still keep the long term at 10. So keep telling the world that we have not changed the long term capital gains tax, but you have changed the tax rate for the country by 5-7%.
Samir, my sense is their fear was not so much about the market levels, because it is in some areas where the market levels are high. Their fear is more with F&O volumes. So
F&O volume is not worthy of an economic survey.
No. What can we expect today if you think...
Yesterday I was also calm. But then suddenly...
No, Samir, we are only 15 minutes to the 0 hour. So I'm asking you, if the fear of Nirmala Sitharaman is, F&O volumes are very high, is there anything she can do?
That she doesn't have to do. SEBI can do by even
so
not even directly do. No, you can even tell the exchanges not to come up with these weekly settlements. You don't even have to say it in a, like a formal say. Just tell them we will not approve or whatever. Or I don't know whether approval is needed. But that is not a budget-worthy item. Okay. You can say a little bit, but you can't separately. What can you do?
Okay, Samir, stay on. We have to take a very quick break. 15 minutes to go. We'll also have Dinesh Kanabar back with us. We'll have Ashok Wadhwa joining in this discussion. 15 minutes to go till we hit 11.
Announcements are made that time. So you may have to wait till after the new government comes in July.
Expectations are running high, especially after the FM ruled out spectacular announcements in the interim budget, holding out hope for some surprises in this full budget.
It is an agri-dependent country to a large extent, and therefore we look forward to some agri-incentives, some incentives associated with food processing sector.
Somebody earning 20 lakhs has to pay 30% tax. Correct. That is too less. So that should be rationalized to a lower level.
Allocation in the for the Ministry of MSEMEs has grown, but I feel that it has to go even further because also the credit terms for them is extremely high.
The stock markets are largely hoping for a status quo budget and fear any major changes to taxation.
I think there's a real rise in capital gains tax that would hit the market more than what happened after the election.
With the development of capital market, say taxation issue. This taxation is always a big pain point.
Stock markets are at a record high after a blistering rally. But the fight of capital from household savings into riskier assets has both the RBI governor and the SEBI chief worried.
Household and consumers who traditionally leaned on banks for parking or investing their savings are increasingly turning to capital markets and other financial intermediaries.
Household savings are now going not into capital formation, but into speculative activity.
India Inc. is hoping for measures to accelerate growth while staying on the path towards fiscal consolidation.
The RBI do, and there is scope for that 5.1% for FY25 to be brought down to 4.9%.
The government has an additional 50 basis points in its pocket, because what was not in the interim budget was the 30 basis points of extra dividends that the RBI gave.
This is the first budget of the Modi government where it doesn't enjoy absolute majority. Allies will want their voices to be heard. For the last 25 years, CNBC TV 18 has been India's budget headquarters. The CNBC TV 18 coverage of the Union budget starts right now.
Okay, well, 13 minutes to go for the union budget. 11 o'clock, the finance minister will stand at the floor of the parliament and start presenting the budget. We'll, of course, await details. Samir Arora is with us at Helios Capital, all the way from France. Samir, you've scared all of us good here. Something bad is coming, you told us.
No. See, I'm saying I was quite happy on my holiday here, but that economic survey put me off a little bit, yes. So I tell you what I feel, alive at the moment. So it looks a bit bad.
I got it. But, so let's just assume that nothing on the capital gain, nothing bad nothing comes. Taxation is not tinkered because, exactly 6 months from now, you got another budget. The next one, right? So this is the middle of the year. So there is also one logic being given that why do something like rationalization of capital gains now? So let's just say nothing is touched there. What is the market really looking for in terms of queues, etc.? There will be a vision statement for the next 5 years.
I would think,
first budget of the NDA 3. What are you watching out for?
So I think rest of the budget will be actually good. Good, by good we mean that I don't think it will be populist. A little bit on the margin is okay, because that populism can be shown via state election, state budgets, rather than having to do it in the central budget. The other thing is that there will definitely be some relaxation on tax rates for the taxpayer, that is either change the bracket, increase it from that 7 lakh to, I don't know, 9 lakh or 10 lakh or whatever, or tinker a little bit here or there. And that would be generally not counted as populism, because some of that is fair over time as inflation goes up. And I think the other thing is that the extent of which you were discussing in the panel discussion just before this, that there is more investment required of the private sector. And we can see it already of the state-owned companies, the PSUs. The PSUs are making big announcements on investments, which means that the government is basically saying, now you make on your balance sheet rather than us making that, because maybe there are more demands on the central budget. But the budget per se, ex tax, I think will not be bad. It could be not greatly good, but at worst neutral, which itself is also good enough as far as the market participants are concerned, because the market generally is doing well. So as long as plus minus that it moves on, it's okay in life.
So let's hope that, it's not all bad. Very quickly going to Ashok as well. Ashok, great to have you on. I think, everybody is worried about this whole issue of whether household savings are moving to the capital markets in too aggressive a fashion. This has become the biggest talking point. Do you expect anything in the budget that addresses it?
I personally don't think that they're going to tinker with capital gains on cash deliveries. Household savings going into financial markets is great. I think it's eventually some level of maturity in our financial markets. And I think that that diversity was needed in my view. Having said that, the absolutely lower class of the Indian population starting to invest in F&Os is a matter of worry, particularly because that's the class that the government wants to protect. And, we know who's gaining in the F&O side, right? It's the large global hedge funds that are really winning on the F&O side. So I certainly think that there will be a change in tax legislation to discourage that piece, the F&O piece, and try and protect the lowest community. And they can do it easily.
We should put Samir next on the window. It's a large global hedge fund. Samir is, I don't know. Samir is listening.
No, I think they're referring to different kinds. I think it's the Jane Street.
I'm not referring to Samir.
I'm just joking. But go on, Samir, go on.
There can be no tax because those guys are not paying any tax. So you'll have to discourage them by increasing their STT a little bit. That's all you can do with them. Because if these small guys are, anyway, you're saying the smallest investors, and then they are losing money every day. So corporate tax won't change that. Or a capital gains won't change that. Only STT change can happen, which is what I've been saying forever. Increase STT, please give away our capital gains also. Increase it to whatever level you want. Simultaneously control the volume. You can simultaneously make the cost of speculation high. And it's easier to collect and easier to get it in bad years also, because otherwise capital gains tax is collected only in good years. And we start thinking how much government is losing in a good year, but then there are 3 bad years and you will still collect STT.
So STT is one route. Just very quickly, Ashok, and Dinesh mentioned this before you joined us, that either you hike STT or just call speculative income as a different class of income and put it under the marginal peak rate. Maybe take it back up to 42%, what used to be the peak rate. What's your sense?
So I think STT is certainly one way. Don't just do it on one leg of the transaction, do it on both legs of the transaction, increase the cost a little. So the person who's earning on the margin doesn't have the incentive to participate. But I think, the exemption that was granted a few years ago, excluding F&O trades from definition of speculative income under Section 28, that needs to go back to the original format.
So treat it as business income.
Treat it as business income and treat it with full tax so that you don't get the benefit of capital gains tax.
It's the opposite. The exemption which came in treats it as normal business income. It needs to go to speculative
income. So, that's what I meant.
So I think we have to thank Samir. Samir, you can please go and take your trip to Moulin Rouge or the Eiffel Tower or have your Bordeaux wine.
And please be back, Samir. I think
as long as you're back into us.
I'm stuck today here wanting the budget, so not to worry.
All right. Thanks a lot for that, Samir. Well, I think Shireen has some guests as well. Shireen, 5 minutes to go, I believe.
No. I have no guess, Lata. I have a guess, and this is what I am picking up at this point in time on the back of the conversations that I've been having, is that there has been a flurry of activity in the agriculture department. in the last few days, and a lot of information has been sought. My guess, and as I said, it's my guess that at least as many of our experts were also pointing out that from a rural consumption stimulus measure point of view, PM Kisan, I would look at the number as far as PM Kisan was concerned. Even in the interim budget, the expectation was that the installment would have been indexed for inflation and there would have been a higher amount. So I don't know whether we're finally going to see that in the budget, but what we can say is that there's been a flurry of activity with information being sought from the Agriculture Department in the last few days pertaining to PM Kisan. So that's certainly going to be something to watch out for. And, other numbers that I think Pranjal also specifically brought that up. When we talk about social sector spending, so things like NREGS, etc., are we likely to see higher allocations for existing schemes that may move the needle as far as the rural economy is concerned? That would, of course, be something to watch out for. But what we're literally, I think, 4 minutes away now before the Finance Minister addresses the nation and presents her 7th speech. But some of those numbers, and just the point that Vinayak Chatterjee made, and I think this is again something that we're picking up here from industry, that, the narrative that the government is sending out seems to be, look, we have done the heavy lifting. It is your time now. It is your turn now. But for that pivot to happen in the interim, could it come at the cost of growth? And is that why they have factored in a much more prudent growth number of 6.5% to 7%? But of course, these are the conversations that are happening behind the scenes here at our budget headquarters. Back to you guys.
Got that, Shireen. Just on agriculture itself, the way they handled the MSP, there was no welfareism about it. So we'll have to really wait and see. But, 2 quick tax changes that that is uppermost in your mind, Dinesh Kanabar. BEPS, anything would you expect? Or just anything?
So BEPS certainly something will come in, and it has to come in because India is among the last few countries where domestic legislation has not come in. It's needed, anticipated. I won't go into technicalities of pillar 1, pillar 2. I think that's not relevant at this point of time, but India certainly will participate in that whole thing. The second thing, and which is of course most important for me, is that there has been a very significant representation to the government that we need to relook at the litigation scenario. It's just been accumulating. There are bottlenecks after bottlenecks. A Commissioner Appeals, which is the first litigation scenario, is stuck up for a few years now. Tribunal is sitting literally with very minuscule work, and Commissioner Appeals is not working. How does one address that? That's something which we need to see. There has been, and this happens every year, Lata, so sometimes one gets skeptical about it, as to whether government can come up with some sort of a settlement scheme where everything does not need to litigate, but you can resolve an issue on preponderance of probability. A mechanism has been suggested. Let's see what comes out of that. And the last thing from my perspective is that, is there an ability of the government to come back and say that the 15% tax regime which was there for new manufacturing companies, can that be extended? If you want to investment in chips and whatever else, then that's something which is very important.
We've got a couple of minutes to go for the budget speech to start. We have Ramesh Damani also joining in, market veteran, needs no introduction, member Bombay Stock Exchange. Sir, a couple of minutes away. So maybe, one question to you. Do you see a big vision being outlined for the next 5 years, and what would you watch out for from the budget?
Most people forget, but the historic budget that Manmohan Singh delivered on liberalization took place on 24th July 1991, exactly 33 years ago. And that has changed the course of the Indian economy. But now, are we going to get to the second stage of reforms? The government has been promising us what they call Viksit Bharat, complete roadmap for industrialization, not for the next 30 years, but for the next 20 years. And I think the government and the public and the markets are expecting some intellectual architecture as Manmohan Singh delivered, liberalization, cut down on tariffs, privatization. I think there's some sort of expectations built into the budget that this will be also a big bang budget outlining a lot of policy structures for the government. So yes, we are expecting that, but a lot of the hard work into the economy has already been done. So we're not expecting many changes, but I think there will be big budget reform.
Okay, Ramesh, just stay on. Ashok, just very quickly, another ask has been this 20% buyback tax. Through the stock market, take it away or make some changes. Anything on buybacks or dividends?
I think it makes sense to do that. I mean, if you have one regime for secondary transactions, you can't have a different regime for buybacks because it results in the same thing. But unfortunately, I don't expect a change happening in that at this point of time.
The issue is double. I mean, the seller buyer both paying the tax, right? I mean, that's so.
No, it's the
No, it's
company
not.
paying
It's
the
the company
tax.
paying the tax, but the challenge is that they are equating buyback to dividend, and they are saying that if dividend is double taxed because the recipient is paying tax, then why should buyback, which is really a proxy to dividend distribution, why should that not have a higher tax?
So a quick word there.
So
is
higher
that,
tax. You're actually saying
No. I'm saying higher in terms of capital gains
Ah,
versus
okay.
I think the point really is that be careful what you wish for. So the industry has been pushing for buyback tax removal.
Yeah.
If it happens and if it gets equated with capital gains, we are okay. But if it gets equated with dividend, as it happened in the context of dividend, then you would be in a worse situation.
Okay,
And that's-
take your point. All right, gentlemen, we are like, it's 0 hour, so we will not interrupt you in the middle of a sentence. Let's just wait for the finance minister to start. The cameras are all panned to Parliament and to the speaker, and whether he ushers in and asks the finance minister to speak. It's 11 by our clock, so let's wait and see if it synchronizes with the Parliament's clock. And the markets are just about flat.
Absolutely
Not
flat.
moved
Lala.
at all,
Yeah.
you would say. There was in the morning a green start, but after that, flat as flat can get.
There you go. I think
I think
we're
we're
kicking
starting proceedings in Parliament.
माननीय सदस्यगण, मुझे अपनी ओर से तथा सदन के माननीय सदस्यों की ओर से अंतर संसदीय संघ आईपीयू की प्रेसिडेंट और तंजानिया संयुक्त गणराज्य की नेशनल असेंबली की अध्यक्ष माननीय डॉक्टर तुलिया एक्सन का स्वागत करते हुए अत्यंत प्रसन्नता हो रही है। वे हमारी सम्मानित अतिथि के रूप में भारत की आधिकारिक यात्रा पर आई है। ये हमारे लिए खुशी की बात है कि डॉक्टर एक्सन बजट सत्र को देखने के लिए यहाँ उपस्थित है। माननीय डॉक्टर तुलिया एक्सन शुक्रवार दिनांक 19 जुलाई 2024 को भारत पहुंची। उन्होंने 21 जुलाई 2024 को आगरा का भ्रमण किया और इस समय वह विशेष बॉक्स में आसीन है। हम भारत में उनके सुखद और सफल प्रवास की कामना करते हैं। हम अंतर संसदीय संघ के प्रेसिडेंट के रूप में उनकी भूमिका के लिए सफलता की भी कामना करते हैं। उनके माध्यम से हम तंजानिया गणराज्य की संसद के सदस्यों, तंजानिया की सरकार तथा वहां की मित्र जनता को बधाई और शुभकामनाएं देते हैं। माननीय सदस्यगण, जैसा कि आपको समाचार भाग 2 के माध्यम से पहले ही सूचित किया जा चुका है कि माननीय वित्त मंत्री जी के बजट भाषण की प्रतियां हार्ड कॉपी के रूप में उपलब्ध कराई जाएगी। अतः बजट प्रस्तुत हो जाने के पश्चात माननीय सदस्य कृपया बजट भाषण की अपनी अपनी प्रति प्रकाशन काउंटर से प्राप्त कर लें। आपको ये भी सूचित किया जाता है कि माननीय मंत्री द्वारा बजट प्रस्तुत किए जाने के पश्चात बजट की प्रतियां आपको मेंबर्स पोर्टल के माध्यम से भी उपलब्ध करा दी जाएगी। माननीय वित्त मंत्री श्रीमती निर्मला सीतारमण।
Honorable Speaker, I present the budget for 24-25. Introduction. The people of India have reposed their faith in the government led by Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi and re-elected it for a historic third term under his leadership. We are grateful for their support, faith, and trust in our policies. We are determined to ensure that all Indians, regardless of religion, caste, gender, and age make substantial progress in realizing their life goals and aspirations. Global context. The global economy, while performing better than expected, is still in the grip of policy uncertainties. Elevated asset prices, political uncertainties, and shipping disruptions continue to pose significant downside risks for growth and upside risks to inflation. In this context, India's economic growth continues to be the shining exception and will remain so in the years ahead. India's inflation continues to be low, stable, and moving towards the 4% target. Core inflation, that is non-food and non-fuel, currently is 3.1%. Steps are being taken to ensure supplies of perishable goods reach markets adequately. Interim budget. As mentioned in the interim budget, we need to focus on 4 major castes, namely the Garib, Mahilaye, Yuva, and Annadata, the poor, women, youth, and the farmer. For Annadata, we announced higher minimum support prices a month ago for all major crops, delivering on the promise of at least a 50% margin over costs. Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana was extended for 5 years, benefiting more than 80 crore people. Administrative actions for approval and implementation of various schemes announced in the interim budget are well underway. The required allocations have been made. Budget theme. Turning attention to the full year and beyond in this budget, we particularly focus on employment, skilling, MSMEs, and the middle class. I'm happy to announce the Prime Minister's package of 5 schemes and initiatives to facilitate employment, skilling, and other opportunities for 4.1 crore youth over a 5-year period, with a central outlay of 2 lakh crore rupees. I will speak about them shortly, while more details may be seen in the annexure. This year, I've made a provision of 1.48 lakh rupees, 1.48 lakh crore rupees for education, employment, and skilling. Budget priorities. The people have given a unique opportunity to our government to take the country on the path of strong development and an all-round prosperity. In the interim budget, we promise to present a detailed roadmap for our pursuit of Vikasit Bharat. In line with the strategy set out in the interim budget, this budget envisages sustained efforts on the following 9 priorities for generating ample opportunities for all. Number 1, productivity and resilience in agriculture. Number 2, employment and skilling. Number 3, inclusive human resource development and social justice. 4, manufacturing and services. 5, urban development. 6, energy security. 7, infrastructure. 8, innovation, research and development. And 9, next generation reforms. Subsequent budgets will build on these and add more priorities and actions. A more detailed formulation will be carried out as part of the economic policy framework about which I will speak later in this speech. This budget details some of the specific actions to be initiated in the current year towards fulfillment of these priorities, with potential for transformative changes. The budget also covers some of the previously made announcements with intent to strengthen them and step up their implementation for expediting our journey towards the goal of Viksit Bharat. Priority 1, productivity and resilience in agriculture. Transforming agricultural research. Our government will undertake a comprehensive review of the agricultural research setup to bring the focus on raising productivity and developing climate resilient varieties. Funding will be provided in challenge mode, including to the private sector. Domain experts, both from the government and outside, will oversee the conduct of such research. Release of new varieties. New 109 high-yielding and climate-resilient varieties of 32 field and horticultural crops will be released for cultivation by farmers. Natural farming. In the next 2 years, 1 crore farmers across the country will be initiated into natural farming, supported by certification and branding. Implementation will be through scientific institutions and willing gram panchayats. 10,000 need-based bio-input resource centers will be established. Missions for pulses and oilseeds. For achieving self-sufficiency in pulses and oilseeds, we will strengthen their production, storage, and marketing. As announced in the interim budget, a strategy is being put in place to achieve Atmanirbharta for oilseeds such as mustard, groundnut, sesame, soybean, and sunflower. Vegetable production and supply chains. Large-scale clusters for vegetable production will be developed closer to major consumption centers. We will promote farmer-producer organizations, cooperatives, and startups for vegetable supply chains, including for collection and storage and marketing. Digital public infrastructure for agriculture. Buoyed by the success of the pilot project, our government, in partnership with the states, will facilitate the implementation of the digital public infrastructure in agriculture for coverage of farmers and their lands in 3 years. During this year, digital crop survey for Kharif using the DPI will be taken up in 400 districts. The details of 6 crore farmers and their lands will be brought into the farmer and land registries. Further, the issuance of Jan Samarth based Kisan credit cards will be enabled in 5 states. Shrimp production and export. Financial support for setting up a network of nucleus breeding centers for shrimp brood stocks will be provided. Financing for shrimp farming, processing, and export will be facilitated through NABARD. National cooperation policy. Our government will bring out a national cooperation policy for systematic, orderly, and all-round development of the cooperative sector, fast-tracking growth of rural economy and generation of employment opportunities on a large scale will be the policy goal. This year, I have made a provision of 1.52 lakh crore rupees for agriculture and allied sectors. Priority 2, employment and skilling. Employment-linked incentive. Our government will implement following 3 schemes for employment-linked incentive as part of the Prime Minister's package. These will be based on enrollment in the EPFO and focus on recognition of first-time employees and support to employees and employers. Scheme A, first-timers. This scheme will provide 1 month wage to all persons newly entering the workforce in all formal sectors. Direct benefit transfer of 1 month's salary in 3 installments to first-time employees as registered in the EPFO will be up to 15,000 rupees. The eligibility limit will be a salary of 1 lakh per month. The scheme is expected to benefit 210 lakh youths. Scheme B, job creation in manufacturing. This scheme will incentivize additional employment in the manufacturing sector linked to the employment of first-time employees. An incentive will be provided at specified scale directly both to the employee and the employer with respect to the EPFO contribution in the first 4 years of employment. The scheme is expected to benefit 30 lakh youth entering employment and their employers. Scheme C, support to employers. This employer-focused scheme will cover additional employment in all sectors. All additional employment within a salary of 1 lakh rupee per month will be counted. The government will reimburse to employers up to 3,000 rupees per month for 2 years towards the EPFO contribution for each additional employee. The scheme is expected to incentivize additional employment of 50 lakh persons. Participation of women in the workforce. We will facilitate higher participation of women in the workforce through setting up of working women hostels in collaboration with industry and establishing creches. In addition, the partnership will seek to organize women-specific skilling programs and promotion of market access for women SHG enterprises. Skilling program. I'm happy to announce a new centrally sponsored scheme as the 4th scheme under the Prime Minister's package for skilling in collaboration with state governments and industry. 20 lakh youth will be skilled over a 5-year period. Industrial training institutes will be upgraded in hub and spoke arrangements with outcome orientation. Course content and design will be aligned to the skill needs of industry, and new courses will be introduced for emerging needs. Skilling loans. The model skill loan scheme will be revised to facilitate loans up to 7.5 lakh rupees with a guarantee from a government-promoted fund. This measure is expected to help 25,000 students every year. Education loans. For helping our youth who have not been eligible for any benefit under government schemes and policies, I'm happy to announce a financial support for loans up to 10 lakh rupees for higher education in domestic institutions. E-vouchers for this purpose. E-vouchers for this purpose will be given directly to 1 lakh students every year for annual interest subvention of 3% of the loan amount. Priority 3, inclusive human resource development and social justice, saturation approach. Our government is committed to all-round, all-pervasive and all-inclusive development of people, particularly farmers, youth, women, and the poor. For achieving social justice comprehensively, the saturation approach of covering all eligible people through various programs, including those for education and health, will be adopted to empower them by improving their capabilities. Implementation of schemes meant for supporting economic activities by craftsmen, artisans, self-help groups, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and women entrepreneurs and street vendors such as the PM Vishwakarma, PM Swanidhi, National Livelihood Missions, and Stand Up India will be stepped up. Purvodaya. The states in the eastern part of the country are rich in endowments and have strong cultural traditions. We will formulate a plan, Purvodaya, for the all-round development of the eastern region of the country, covering Bihar, Jharkhand, West Bengal, Odisha, and Andhra Pradesh. This will cover human resource development, infrastructure, and generation of economic opportunities to make the region an engine to attain Vikasit Bharat. On the Amritsar-Kolkata Industrial Corridor, we will support development of an industrial node at Gaya. This corridor will catalyze industrial development of the eastern region. The industrial node at Gaya will also be a good model for developing our ancient centers of cultural importance into future centers of modern economy. This model shall showcase Vikas B, Virasat B in our growth trajectory. We will also support development of road connectivity projects, namely 1. Patna-Purnia Expressway, 2. Buxar-Bhagalpur Expressway, 3. Bodh Gaya, Rajgir, Vaishali and Darbhanga spurs, and 4. Additional 2-lane bridge over River Ganga at Buxar at a total cost of 26,000 crore rupees. Power projects, including setting up of a new 2,400 megawatt power plant at Pir Painti, will be taken up at a cost of 21,400 crore rupees. New airports, medical colleges, and sports infrastructure in Bihar will be constructed. An additional allocation to support capital investments will be provided. The requests of Bihar government for external assistance from multilateral development banks will be expedited. Andhra Pradesh Reorganization Act. Our government has made concerted efforts to fulfill the commitments in Andhra Pradesh Reorganization Act. Recognizing the state's need for the capital, recognizing the state's need for a capital, we will facilitate special financial support through multilateral development agencies. In the current financial year, 15,000 crore rupees will be arranged with additional amounts in future years. Our government is fully committed to financing and early completion of the Polavaram irrigation project, which is the lifeline. For Andhra Pradesh, country's food security as well. Under the Act, Andhra Pradesh Reorganization Act, for promoting industrial development, funds will be provided for essential infrastructure such as water, power, railways, and roads in Kopparthi node on the Visakhapatnam-Chennai industrial corridor and Varavakal node on the Hyderabad-Bangalore industrial corridor. An additional allocation will be provided this year towards capital investment for economic growth. Grants for backward regions of Rayalaseema, Prakasham, North Coastal Andhra, as stated in the Act, will be provided. Awas Yojana. 3 crore additional houses under the PM Awas Yojana in rural and urban areas in the country have been announced, for which the necessary allocations are being made. Women-led development. For promoting women-led development, the budget carries an allocation of more than 3 lakh crore for schemes benefiting women and girls. This signals our government's commitment for enhancing women's role in economic development. Pradhan Mantri Janjatiya Unnat Gram Abhiyan. For improving the socio-economic condition of tribal communities, we will launch the Pradhan Mantri Janjatiya Unnat Gram Abhiyan by adopting saturation coverage for tribal families in tribal majority villages and aspirational districts. This will cover 63,000 villages, benefiting 5 crore tribal people. Bank branches in northeastern region. More than 100 branches of India Post Payment Bank will be set up in the northeast region to expand the banking services. This year, I have made a provision of 2.66 lakh crore rupees for rural development, including rural infrastructure. Priority 4, manufacturing and services, support for promotion of MSMEs. This budget provides special attention to MSMEs and manufacturing, particularly labor-intensive manufacturing. We have formulated a package covering financing, regulatory changes, and technology support for MSMEs to help them grow and also compete globally, as mentioned in the interim budget. I'm happy to announce the following specific measures. Credit guarantee scheme for MSMEs in the manufacturing sector. For facilitating term loans to MSMEs for purchase of machinery and equipment without collateral or third-party guarantee, a credit guarantee scheme will be introduced. The scheme will operate on pooling of credit risks of such MSMEs. A separately constituted self-financing guarantee fund will provide to each applicant guarantee cover up to 100 crore rupees, while the loan amount may be larger. The borrower will have to provide an upfront guarantee fee and an annual guarantee fee on the reducing loan balance. New assessment model for MSME credit. Public sector banks will build their own in-house capability to assess MSMEs for credit instead of relying on external assessment. They will also take a lead in developing or getting developed a new credit assessment model based on the scoring of digital footprints of the MSMEs in the economy. This is expected to be a significant improvement over the traditional assessment of credit eligibility based only on asset or turnover criteria. That will also cover MSMEs without a formal accounting system. Credit support to MSMEs during stress period. I'm happy to announce a new mechanism for facilitating continuation of bank credit to MSMEs during their stress period while being in special mention account, SMA stage for reasons beyond their control. MSMEs need credit to continue their business and to avoid getting into the NPA stage. Credit availability will be supported through a guarantee from a government-promoted fund. Mudra loans. The limit of Mudra loans will be enhanced to 20 lakh from the current 10 lakh for those entrepreneurs who have availed and successfully repaid previous loans under the Tarun category. Enhanced scope for mandatory onboarding in TREDS. For facilitating MSMEs to unlock their working capital by converting their trade receivables into cash, I propose to reduce the turnover threshold of buyers for mandatory onboarding on the TREDS platform from rupees 500 crore to 250 crore rupees. This measure will bring 22 more CPSEs and 7,000 more companies onto the platform. Medium enterprises will also be included in the scope of the suppliers. SIDBI branches in MSME clusters. SIDBI will open new branches to expand its reach to serve all major MSME clusters within 3 years and provide direct credit to them. With the opening of 24 such branches this year, the service coverage will expand to 168 out of 242 major clusters. MSME units for food irradiation, quality and safety testing. Financial support for setting up of 50 multi-product food irradiation units in the MSME sector will be provided. Setting up of 100 food quality and safety testing labs with NABL accreditation will be facilitated. E-commerce export hubs. To enable MSMEs and traditional artisans to sell their products in international markets, e-commerce export hubs will be set up in public-private partnership mode. These hubs, under a seamless regulatory and logistic framework, will facilitate trade and export-related services under one roof. Measures for promotion of manufacturing and services. Internship in top companies. As the fifth scheme under Prime Minister's package, our government will launch a comprehensive scheme for providing internship opportunities in 500 top companies to 1 crore youth in 5 years. They will gain exposure for 12 months to real-life business environment, varied professions, and employment opportunities. An internship allowance of 5,000 per month, 5,000 rupees per month, along with a one-time assistance of 6,000 rupees will be provided. Companies will be expected to bear the training cost and 10% of their internship cost from their CSR funds. Industrial parks. Our government will facilitate development of investment-ready, plug-and-play industrial parks with complete infrastructure in or near 100 cities in partnership with the states and private sector by better using town planning schemes. 12 industrial parks under the National Industrial Corridor Development Program also will be sanctioned.
Veggie member, no, please, Petty.
Rental housing. Rental housing with dormitory type accommodation for industrial workers will be, just 1 minute. Rental housing, I repeat, rental housing with dormitory type accommodation for industrial workers will be facilitated in PPP mode with VGF support and commitment from anchor industries. Shipping industry, ownership, leasing, and flagging reforms will be implemented to improve the share of Indian shipping industry and generate more employment. Critical mineral mission. We will set up a critical mineral mission for domestic production, recycling of critical minerals, and overseas acquisition of critical mineral assets. Its mandate will include technology development, skilled workforce, extended producer responsibility framework, and a suitable financing mechanism. Offshore mining of minerals. Our government will launch the auction of the first tranche of offshore blocks for mining, building on the exploration already carried out. Digital public infrastructure applications. Turning to the services sector, I propose development of DPI applications at population scale for productivity gains, business opportunities, and innovation by the private sector. These are planned in the areas of credit, e-commerce, education, health, law and justice, logistics, MSME service delivery, and urban governance. Integrated technology platform for IBC ecosystem. An integrated technology platform will be set up for improving the outcomes under the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code for achieving consistency, transparency, timely processing, and better oversight for all stakeholders. Voluntary closure of LLPs. The services of the Center for Processing Accelerated Corporate Exit, CPACE, will be extended for voluntary closure of LLPs to reduce the closure times. National Company Law Tribunals. The IBC has resolved more than 1,000 companies, resulting in direct recovery of 3.3 lakh crore to creditors. 3.3 lakh crore rupees to creditors. In addition, 28,000 cases involving over 10 lakh crore rupees have been disposed of even prior to admission. Appropriate changes to the IBC, reforms and strengthening of the tribunal and appellate tribunals will be initiated to speed up insolvency resolution. Additional tribunals will be established. Out of those, some will be notified to decide cases exclusively under the Companies Act. Debt recovery. Steps for reforming and strengthening debt recovery tribunals will be taken. Additional tribunals will be established to speed up recovery. Priority 5, urban development. Cities as growth hubs. Working with states, our government will facilitate development of cities as growth hubs. This will be achieved through economic and transit planning and orderly development of peri-urban areas utilizing town planning schemes. Creative redevelopment of cities. For creative brownfield redevelopment of existing cities with a transformative impact, our government will formulate a framework for enabling policies, market-based mechanisms, and regulation. Transit-oriented development. Transit-oriented development plans for 14 large cities with a population above 30 lakh will be formulated, along with an implementation and financing strategy. Urban housing. Under the PM Awas Yojana, Urban 2.0, housing needs of 1 crore urban poor and middle class families will be addressed with an investment of 10 lakh crore rupees. This will include the central assistance of 2.2 lakh crore rupees in the next 5 years. A provision of interest subsidy to facilitate loans at affordable rates is also envisaged. In addition, enabling policies and regulations for efficient and transparent rental housing markets with enhanced availability will also be put in place. Water supply and sanitation. In partnership with state governments and multilateral development banks, we will promote water supply, sewage treatments, and solid waste management projects and services for 100 large cities through bankable projects. These projects will also envisage use of treated water for irrigation and filling up of tanks in nearby areas. Street markets. Building on the success of PM Swanidhi scheme in transforming the lives of street vendors, our government envisions a scheme to support each year over the next 5 years the development of 100 weekly hearts or street food hubs in select cities. Stamp duty. We will encourage states which continue to charge high stamp duty to moderate the rates for all and also consider further lowering duties for properties purchased by women. This reform will be made an essential component of urban development schemes. Priority 6, energy security, energy transition. In the interim budget, I had announced our strategy to sustain high and more resource efficient economic growth, along with the energy security in terms of availability, accessibility, and affordability. We will bring out a policy document on appropriate energy transition pathways that balances the imperatives of employment, growth, and environmental sustainability. PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana. PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana. In line with the announcement in the interim budget, PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana has been launched to install rooftop solar plants to enable 1 crore households obtain free electricity up to 300 units every month. The scheme has generated remarkable response with more than 1.28 crore registrations and 14 lakh applications, and we will further encourage it. Pumped storage policy. A policy for promoting pumped storage projects will be brought out for electricity storage and facilitating smooth integration of the growing share of renewable energy with its variable and intermittent nature in the overall energy mix. research and development of small and modular nuclear reactors. Nuclear energy is expected to form a very significant part of the energy mix for Vikasit Bharat. Towards that pursuit, our government will partner with the private sector for 1. Setting up Bharat Small Reactors, 2. Research and development of Bharat Small Modular Reactor, and 3. Research and development of newer technologies for nuclear energy. The R&D funding announced in the interim budget will be made available for this sector also. Advanced ultra supercritical thermal power plants. The development of indigenous technology for advanced ultra supercritical thermal power plants with much higher efficiency has been completed. A joint venture between NTPC and BHEL will set up a full-scale 800 megawatt commercial plant using AUSC technology. The government will provide the required fiscal support. Moving forward, development of indigenous capacity for the production of high-grade steel and other advanced metallurgy materials for these plants will result in strong spin-off benefits for the economy. Roadmap for hard-to-abate industries. A roadmap for moving the hard-to-abate industries from energy efficiency targets to emission targets will be formulated. Appropriate regulations for transition of these industries from the current perform, achieve, and trade mode to Indian carbon market mode will be put in place. Support to traditional micro and small industries. An investment-grade energy audit of traditional micro and small industries in 60 clusters, including brass and ceramic, will be facilitated. Financial support will be provided for shifting them to cleaner forms of energy and implementation of energy efficiency measures. The scheme will be replicated in another 100 clusters in the next phase. Priority 7, infrastructure investment by central government. Significant investment the central government has made over the years in building and improving infrastructure has had a strong multiplier effect on the economy. We will endeavor to maintain strong fiscal support for infrastructure over the next 5 years in conjunction with imperatives of other priorities and fiscal consolidation. This year, I have provided 11,111 crore rupees for capital expenditure. This would be 3.4% of our GDP. Infrastructure investment by state governments. We will encourage states to provide support of similar scale for infrastructure, subject to their development priorities. A provision of 1.5 lakh crore rupees for long-term interest-free loans have been made this year also to support the states in their resource allocation. Private investment in infrastructure. Investment in infrastructure by private sector will be promoted through viability gap funding and enabling policies and regulations. A market-based financing framework will be brought out. Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, phase 4 of the PMGSY will be launched to provide all-weather connectivity to 25,000 rural habitations, which have become eligible in view of their population increase. Irrigation and flood mitigation. Bihar has frequently suffered from floods, many of them originating outside the country. Plans to build flood control structures in Nepal are yet to progress. Our government, through the Accelerated Irrigation Benefit Program and other sources, will provide financial support for projects with estimated cost of 11,500 crore rupees, such as the Kosi-Michi intra-state link and 20 other ongoing and new schemes, including barrages, river pollution abatement, and irrigation projects. In addition, survey and investigation of Kosi-related flood mitigation and irrigation projects will be undertaken. Assam grapples with floods every year by the Brahmaputra River and its tributaries originating outside India. We will provide assistance to Assam for flood management and related projects. Himachal Pradesh suffered extensive losses due to floods last year. Our government will provide assistance to the state for reconstruction and rehabilitation through multilateral development assistance. Uttarakhand too suffered losses due to cloudbursts and massive landslides. We will provide assistance to the state. Recently, Sikkim witnessed devastating flash floods and landslides that wreaked havoc across the state. Our government will provide assistance to the state. Tourism has always been a part of our civilization. Our efforts in positioning India as a global tourist destination will also create jobs, stimulate investments, and unlock economic opportunities for other sectors. In addition to the measures outlined in the interim budget, I propose the following measures. Vishnupad Temple at Gaya and Mahabodhi Temple at Bodh Gaya in Bihar are of immense spiritual significance. Comprehensive development of Vishnupad's temple corridor and Mahabodhi temple corridor will be supported, modeled on the successful Kashi Vishwanath temple corridor to transform them into world-class pilgrim and tourist destinations. Rajgir holds immense religious significance for Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains. The 20th Tirthankara Muniswarata temple in the Jain temple complex is ancient. The Saptarishi, or the 7 hot springs, form a warm water Brahmkund that is sacred. A comprehensive development initiative for Rajgir will be undertaken. Our government will support the development of Nalanda as a tourist center, besides reviving Nalanda University to its glorious stature. Odisha's scenic beauty, temples, monuments, craftsmanship, wildlife sanctuaries, natural landscapes, and pristine beaches make it an ultimate tourism destination. Our government will provide assistance for their development to Odisha as well. Priority 8, innovation, research, and development. we will operationalize the Anusandhan National Research Fund for basic research and prototype development. Further, we will set up a mechanism for spurring private sector-driven research and innovation at commercial scale, with a financing pool of 1 lakh crore rupees in line with the announcement in the interim budget. Space economy, with our continued emphasis on expanding the space economy by 5 times in the next 10 years, a venture capital fund of 1,000 crore rupees will be set up. Priority 9, next generation reforms. Economic policy framework. We will formulate an economic policy framework to delineate the overarching approach to economic development and set the scope of the next generation of reforms for facilitating employment opportunities and sustaining high growth. Our government will initiate and incentivize reforms for 1, improving productivity of factors of production, and 2, facilitating markets and sectors to become more efficient. These reforms will cover all factors of production, namely land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, and technology as an enabler of improving total factor productivity and bridging inequality. Effective implementation of several of these reforms requires collaboration between the center and the states, and building consensus as development of the country lies in development of the states. For promoting competitive federalism and incentivizing states for faster implementation of reforms, I propose to earmark a significant part of the 50-year interest-free loan. Working with the states, we will initiate the following reforms. Land-related reforms and actions, both in the rural and urban areas, will cover land administration, will cover 1, land administration, planning and management, and 2, urban planning usage and building bylaws. These will be incentivized for completion within the next 3 years through appropriate fiscal support. Rural land-related actions. Rural land-related actions will include 1, assignment of unique land parcel identification number, UL PIN, or Bhu Aadhaar for all lands. 2, digitization of cadastral maps. 3, survey of subdivisions, survey of map subdivisions as per current ownership. 4, establishment of land registry. And 5, linking to the farmers registry. These actions will also facilitate credit flow and other agricultural services. Urban land-related actions. Land records in urban areas will be digitized with GIS mapping. An IT-based system for property record administration, updating, and tax administration will be established. These will also facilitate improving the financial position of urban local bodies. Labor-related reforms. Services to labor. Our government will facilitate the provision of a wide array of services to labor, including those for employment and skilling. A comprehensive integration of e-Shram portal with other portals will facilitate such one-stop solution. Open architecture databases for the rapidly changing labor market, skill requirements, and available job roles, and a mechanism to connect job aspirants with potential employers and skill providers will be covered in these services. Shram Suvidha and Samadhan portal. Shram Suvidha and Samadhan portal will be revamped to enhance ease of compliance for industry and trade. Capital and entrepreneurship related reforms, financial sector vision and strategy. For meeting financing needs of the economy, our government will bring out a financial sector vision and strategy document to prepare the sector in terms of size, capacity, and skills. This will set the agenda for the next 5 years and guide the work of the government, regulators, financial institutions, and market participants. Taxonomy for climate finance. We will develop taxonomy for climate finance for enhancing the availability of capital for climate adaptation and mitigation. This will support achievement of the country's climate commitments and green transition. Variable capital company structure. We will seek the required legislative approval for providing an efficient and flexible mode for financing leasing of aircrafts and ships and pooled funds of private equity through a variable company structure. Foreign direct investments and overseas investment. The rules and regulations for foreign direct investment and overseas investments will be simplified to 1. Facilitate foreign direct investments, 2. Nudge prioritization, and 3. Promote opportunities for using Indian rupee as a currency for overseas investment. NPS Vatsalya. NPS Vatsalya, a plan for contribution by parents and guardians for minors, will be started. On attaining the age of majority, the plan can be converted seamlessly into a normal NPS account. Use of technology. We have successfully used technology for improving productivity and bridging inequality in our economy during the past 10 years. Public investment in digital infrastructure and innovations by the private sector have helped in improving access of all citizens, particularly the common people, to market resources, education, health, and services. We will step up adoption of technology towards digitalization of the economy. Ease of doing business. For enhancing ease of doing business, we are already working on the Jan Vishwas Bill 2.0. Further, states will be incentivized for implementation of the business reforms, action plans, and digitalization. Data and statistics. For improving data governance, collection, processing, and management of data and statistics, different sectoral databases, including those established under the Digital India Mission, will be utilized with active use of technology tools. New pension scheme. The committee to review the NPS has made considerable progress in its work. I'm happy that the staff side of the National Council of the Joint Consultative Machinery for Central Government Employees has taken a constructive approach. A solution will be evolved which addresses the relevant issues while maintaining fiscal prudence to protect the common citizens. Budget estimates for 24-25. For the year 24-25, total receipts other than borrowings and the total expenditure are estimated at 32.07 lakh crore rupees and 48.21 lakh crore rupees respectively. The net tax receipts are estimated at 25.83 lakh crore rupees. The fiscal deficit is estimated at 4.9% of the GDP. The gross and the net market borrowings through dated securities during 24-25 are estimated at 14.01 lakh crore rupees and 11.63 lakh crore rupees respectively. Both will be less than that in 23-24. The fiscal consolidation path announced by me in 2021 has served our economy very well, and we aim to reach the deficit below 4.5% next year. The government is committed to staying the course. From 2026-27 onwards, our endeavor will be to keep the fiscal deficit each year such that the central government's debt will be on a declining path as percentage of GDP. I will now move to part B. Indirect taxes. Sir, I start with GST. It has decreased tax incidence on the common man, reduced compliance burden and logistics cost for trade and industry, and enhanced revenues of the central and the state governments. It is a success of vast proportions. To multiply the benefits of GST, we will strive to further simplify and rationalize the tax structure and endeavor to expand it to the remaining sectors. My proposals for customs duties intend to support domestic manufacturing, deepen local value addition, promote export competitiveness, and simplify taxation while keeping the interest of the general public and consumers surmount. In Budget 22-23, we reduced the number of customs duty rates. I propose to undertake a comprehensive review of the rate structure over the next 6 months to rationalize and simplify it for ease of trade, removal of duty inversion, and reduction of disputes. I shall now take up sector-specific customs duty proposals. Medicine and medical equipments. To provide relief to cancer patients, I propose to fully exempt 3 more medicines from customs duties. I also propose changes in the BCD on X-ray tubes and flat panel detectors for use in medical X-ray machines under the phased manufacturing program so as to synchronize them with the domestic capacity addition. Mobile phone and related parts. With a 3-fold increase in domestic production and almost a 100-fold jump in exports of mobile phones over the last 6 years, the Indian mobile industry has matured. In the interest of consumers, I now propose to reduce the BCD on mobile phone, mobile PCBA, and mobile charger to 15%. Critical minerals. Minerals such as lithium, copper, cobalt, and rare earth elements are critical for sectors like nuclear energy, renewable energy, space, defense, telecommunications, and high-tech electronics. I propose to fully exempt customs duties on 25 critical minerals and reduce BCD on 2 of them. This will provide a major fillip to the processing and refining of such minerals and help secure their availability for these strategic and important sectors. Solar energy. Energy transition is critical in the fight against climate change. To support energy transition, I propose to expand the list of exempted capital goods for use in the manufacture of solar cells and panels in the country. Further, in view of sufficient domestic manufacturing capacity of solar gas, glass, and tinned copper interconnect, I propose not to extend the exemption of custom duties provided to them. Marine products. India's seafood exports in the last financial year touched an all-time high of more than 60,000 crores of rupees. Frozen shrimp accounted for about 2/3 of these exports. To enhance their competitiveness, I propose to reduce BCD on certain broodstock, polychaete worms, shrimp, and fish feed to 5%. I also propose to exempt customs duty on various inputs for manufacture of shrimp and fish feed, leather and textile. Similarly, to enhance the competitiveness of exports in the leather and textile sectors, I propose to reduce BCD on real down-filling material from duck or goose. I am also making additions to the list of exempted goods for manufacture of leather and textile garments, footwear, and other leather articles for export. To rectify inversion in duty, I propose to reduce BCD subject to conditions on methylene diphenyl diisocyanate MDI for manufacture of spandex yarn from 7.5 to 5%. Furthermore, the export duty structure on raw hides, skin, and leather is proposed to be simplified and rationalized. Precious metals. To enhance domestic value addition in gold and precious metal jewelry in the country, I propose to reduce customs duties on gold and silver to 6% and that of platinum to 6.4%. Other metals. Steel and copper are important raw materials. To reduce their cost of production, I propose to remove the BCD on ferronickel and blister copper. I am also continuing with nil BCD on ferrous scrap and nickel cathode and concessional BCD of 2.5% on copper scrap. Electronics. To increase value addition in the domestic electronics industry, I propose to remove the BCD subject to conditions on oxygen-free copper for manufacture of resistors. I also propose to exempt certain parts for manufacture of connectors. Chemicals and petrochemicals. To support existing and new capacities in the pipeline, I propose to increase the BCD on ammonium nitrate from 7.5% to 10%. Plastics. PVC flex banners are non-biodegradable and hazardous for environment and health. To curb their imports, I propose to raise the BCD on them from 10 to 25%. Telecommunication equipment. To incentivize domestic manufacturing, I propose to increase the BCD from 10 to 15% on PCBA of specified telecom equipment. Trade facilitation. To promote domestic aviation and boat and ship MRO, I propose to extend the period for export of goods imported for repairs from 6 months to 1 year. I'll read that again. To promote domestic aviation and boat and ship maintenance, repair and operations, I propose to extend the period for export of goods imported for repairs from 6 months to 1 year. In the same vein, I propose to extend the time limit for re-import of goods for repairs under warranty from 3 to 5 years. I now move to direct taxes. We will continue our efforts to simplify taxes, improve taxpayer services, provide tax certainty, and reduce litigation while enhancing revenues for funding the development and welfare schemes of the government. It has been our endeavor to simplify taxation. We have taken a number of measures in the last few years, including introduction of simplified tax regimes without exemptions and deductions for corporate tax and for personal income tax. This has been appreciated by taxpayers. 58% of corporate tax came from the simplified tax regime in the financial year 22-23. Similarly, as per data available till now, for the last fiscal, more than 2/3 have availed the new personal income tax regime. Comprehensive review of the Income Tax Act. I'm now announcing a comprehensive review of the Income Tax Act 1961. The purpose is to make the Act concise, lucid, easy to read and understand. This will reduce disputes and litigation, thereby providing tax certainty to the taxpayers. I will also bring down the demand embroiled in litigation. It is proposed to be completed in 6 months. A beginning is being made in the finance bill by simplifying the tax regime for charities, TDS rate structures, provisions of reassessment and such provisions, and capital gains taxation. Simplification for charities and TDS. Two tax exemption regimes. The two tax exemption regimes for charities are proposed to be merged into one. The 5% TDS rate on many payments is being merged into the 2% TDS rate, and the 20% TDS rate on repurchase of units by mutual funds or UTI is being withdrawn. TDS rate on e-commerce operators is proposed to be reduced from 1 to 0.1%. Moreover, credit of TCS is proposed to be given in the TDS to be deducted on salary. Further, I propose to decriminalize delay for payment of TDS up to the due date of filing statement for the same. I also plan to provide a standard operating procedure for TDS defaults and simplify and rationalize the compounding guidelines for such defaults. Simplification of reassessment. I propose to thoroughly simplify the provisions for reopening and reassessment. An assessment hereinafter can be reopened beyond 3 years from the end of the assessment year only if the escaped income is 50 lakh rupees or more, up to a maximum period of 5 years from the end of the assessment year. Even in such cases, a time limit of 6 years before the year of the search, as against the existing time limit of 10 years, is being proposed. This will reduce tax uncertainty and disputes. Simplification and rationalization of capital gains. Capital gains taxation is also proposed to be hugely simplified. Short-term gains on certain financial assets shall henceforth attract a tax rate of 20%, while that on all other financial assets and all non-financial assets shall continue to attract the applicable tax rate. Long-term gains on all financial and non-financial assets, on the other hand, will attract a tax rate of 12.5%. For the benefit of the lower and the middle income classes, I propose to increase the limit of exemption of capital gains on certain financial assets to 1.25 lakh rupees per year. Listed financial assets held for more than a year will be classified as long-term, while unlisted financial assets and all non-financial assets will have to be held for at least 2 years to be classified as long-term. Unlisted bonds and debentures, debt mutual funds, and market-linked debentures, irrespective of holding period, however, will attract tax on capital gains at applicable rates. Taxpayer services. All the major taxpayer services under GST and most services under customs and income tax have been digitalized. All remaining services of customs and income tax, including rectification and order giving effect to appellate orders, shall be digitalized and made paperless over the next 2 years. Litigation and appeals. While our concerted efforts to reduce pendency of appeals at various appellate fora are beginning to show good results, it will continue to engage our highest attention. To dispose of the backlog of first appeals, I plan to deploy more officers to hear and decide such appeals, especially those with large tax effect. For resolution of certain income tax disputes pending in appeal, I am also proposing Vivad Se Vishwas Scheme 2024. Further, I propose to increase monetary limits for filing appeals related to direct taxes, excise, and service tax in the tax tribunals, high courts, and Supreme Court to 60 lakh rupees, 2 crore rupees, and 5 crore respectively, with a view to reduce litigation and provide certainty in international taxation. We will expand the scope of safe harbor rules and make them more attractive. We will also streamline the transfer pricing assessment procedure. Employment and investment. I have a few proposals to promote investment and foster employment. First of all, to bolster the Indian startup ecosystem, boost the entrepreneurial spirit, and to support innovation, I propose to abolish the so-called angel tax for all classes of investors. Second, there is tremendous potential for cruise tourism in India. To give a fillip to this employment-generating industry, I am proposing a simpler tax regime for foreign shipping companies operating domestic cruises in the country. Third, India is a world leader in the diamond cutting and polishing industry, which employs a large number of skilled workers. To further promote the development of this sector, we would provide for safe harbor rates for foreign mining companies selling raw diamonds in the country. Fourth, to attract foreign capital for our development needs, I propose to reduce the corporate tax rate on foreign companies from 40 to 35%. Deepening the tax base. I have a couple of proposals for deepening the tax base. First, security transaction tax on futures and options of securities is proposed to be increased to 0.02% and 0.1% respectively. Second, for reasons of equity, I propose to tax income received on buyback of shares in the hands of recipients. Other proposals. To improve social security benefits, deduction of expenditure by employers towards NPS is proposed to be increased from 10 to 14% of the employee's salary. Similarly, deduction of this expenditure up to 14% of salary from the income of employees in private sector, public sector banks, and undertakings opting for the new tax regime is proposed to be provided. Indian professionals working in multinationals get ESOPs and invest in social security schemes and other movable assets abroad. Non-reporting of such small foreign assets has penal consequences under the Black Money Act. Such non-reporting of movable assets up to 20 lakh rupees is proposed to be depenalized. Other major proposals in the finance bill relate to withdrawal of equalization levy of 2%, expansion of tax benefits to certain funds and entities in IFSCs, and immunity from penalty and prosecution to Benamidar on full and true disclosure so as to improve conviction under the Benami Transaction Prohibition Act 1988. Personal income tax. Coming to personal income tax rates, I have two announcements to make for those opting for the new tax regime. First, the standard deduction for salaried employees is proposed to be increased from 50,000 to 75,000 rupees. Similarly, deduction on family pension for pensioners is proposed to be enhanced from 15,000 to 25,000 rupees. This will provide relief to about 4 crore salaried individuals and pensioners. Second, in the new tax regime, the tax rate structure is proposed to be revised as follows. 0 to 3 lakh rupees, nil. 3 to 7 lakh rupees, 5%. 7 to 10 lakh rupees, 10%. 10 to 12 lakh rupees, 15%. 12 to 15 lakh rupees, 20%. And above 15 lakh rupees, 30%. As a result of these changes, a salaried employee in the new tax regime stands to save up to 17,500 rupees in income tax. Apart from these, I am also making some other changes as given in the annexure. As a result of these proposals, revenue of about 37,000 crore, that is 29,000 crore in direct taxes and 8,000 crore in indirect taxes will be foregone, while revenue of about 30,000 crore rupees will be additionally mobilized. Thus, the total revenue foregone is about 7,000 crores annually. Mr. Speaker, sir, with this, I commend the budget to this august House. Jai Hind.
Item number 2. Item number 2.
Okay, no relief if you're an investor. You pay high capital gains, and you can see the mid-cap index nosediving 2% and the Nifty nosediving 1%. But relief for all of us, 17,500 rupees by way of taxes. I think the Finance Minister is speaking again.
Budget Management, FRBM Act 2003, medium-term fiscal policy fiscal policy strategy statement, and macroeconomic framework statement.
Item number 3.
Sir, with your permission, I rise to move for leave to introduce the Finance number 2 Bill 2024.
प्रश्न ये कि विधेयक को पूरा स्थापित करने की अनुमति प्रदान की जाए। जो सदस्य इसके पक्ष में आके
Okay, well, that is the Finance Minister. The budget is done. And I think the big news, of course, is taxation on equities, capital gains, taxes being tinkered with. The long-term tax has moved up from 10% to 12.5%. The short-term rate has gone up from 15% to 20%. And I think that is essentially, from a market perspective, the big headline. I mean, before the Finance Minister reached that tax section, the market was holding with just about a 50-odd point cut on the Nifty. That's gone straight to for the Nifty to be down about 300 points. I mean, lots and lots of changes as far as taxes are concerned. For the startup world, there is the angel tax, which has now been abolished. And there are many other changes which have been done. But I think the one sort of news point from a taxation perspective, which I think straight off the bat overshadows pretty much everything else right now, is the fact that equities capital gains taxation has been increased both on the long term and on the short term as well. And I think there is, of course, on the futures and options futures and options side, STT, which has also actually been increased. So, after the economic survey yesterday, there was anticipation on the F&O side, and some of the anticipation with regards to capital gains tax on listed equities that had faded away a little bit, but has come back in a big way. I would say this is, a very, very large tax budget more than anything else, with lots of changes on, direct taxes, lots of changes on the custom side, indirect taxation, and much more as well. 350 points down on the Nifty now. So that's the kind of cut that we're seeing. as you know, at this point, the market, of course, reacting in a pretty large way. This is a knee-jerk reaction, but I think what was the market's fear has come through. 24,190 is where we're at on the Nifty. Shireen, you've been talking. Sorry.
To be fair, there has been a little more money put in the hands of taxpayers as well.
Yeah.
But I think the market at the moment is only reacting to the fact that market gains are going to be taxed and taxed substantially higher.
Yeah.
I mean, 15 to 30% to 20% is 30% more amount in terms of
Though
amount of
that
money.
exemption of 1 lakh that we had on long-term capital gains, that's been increased slightly to now
1,25,000,
but
that's
not too much.
marginal.
I mean,
But it is a very big takeaway from the markets, and the markets are reacting. To be fair, they were also sitting long, and therefore some bit of a correction. Buy on news, buy on rumor, and sell on news was always there. But this is something very big for the market. Shreen, anything more with you?
Yeah, Lata, outside of what we've already discussed, which is the changes on the capital gain side as well as F&O and so on and so forth, I think the fine print will have to be looked at, and we have our tax panel here with us. I think the larger message is the message that we've been pointing out to here on CNBC TV 18. I said very clearly that there is going to be no departure as far as the fiscal math is concerned. What was industry saying? That the government capex number has to go up substantially. What has the finance minister delivered? 11.11 lakh crore rupees, exactly the same number that was there in the interim budget. Similar story playing out even as far as the rural allocation is concerned. So there has been no deviation, no departure from the fiscal arithmetic as far as the interim budget was concerned. Good news on the fiscal deficit, again, something that we had reported, 4.9% is the government estimate now as far as fiscal deficit is concerned. So making it clear they are sticking to the fiscal consolidation roadmap. But, there is a lot in this budget, Lata. A lot of it is work in progress. The energy transition framework, the employment schemes that the government has put forward. Many of those 9 priorities continue to be work in progress. And of course, allocations will have to be looked at in the fine print and so on and so forth. But let's bring the tax experts in on what they make. This was being speculated whether this is going to be the budget that finally moves as far as capital gain simplification is concerned. Dinesh Kanabar, Ashok Vadva, to you first. Your reactions on what we've heard from the finance minister. Ashok, to you first.
Obviously, the increase in capital gains tax on listed securities is a bit of a disappointment. I mean, we were all hoping that they will keep it intact and retain market buoyancy. But I guess, as the economic survey had mentioned, government wanted to make a move. The distinction is that they're trying to save for the smaller person. In other words, the lower middle class, they've increased the exemption from 1 to 1.25 cents. They have provided some comfort there, but obviously to the market participants, it's 10 going to 12.5, 15 going to 20 on listed stocks. Only partial good news is that they have therefore brought on the unlisted securities, they have brought the capital gains tax down. So where we were taxing long-term at 20%, that will come down to 12.5%. And where we were taxing short-term, 25 or 39, depending upon whether it was a corporate or an individual, they brought it down to 20%. What we don't know is what they have done with real estate, because that didn't come out very clearly in the messaging. So that's unfortunate, but as I said, par for the course now.
Okay, and what about you,
Yes, and
Dinesh?
you will have to look at the fine print on that. Yeah, Lata, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask Mr. Kanabar, what were the big takeaways on tax?
Quite a few things. Angel tax going away.
Yes.
Will mean that huge amount of money which was coming in, and we are seeing some horror stories. Although there was a lot of liberalization in the recent part, but still there were horror stories. Again, buyback tax, and we discussed this just before the budget was presented, that be careful what you wish for. So it's not being treated as capital gains. It's going to be tax in the hands of the recipient, which would mean that it could actually, in the hands of larger taxpayers, mean a larger share of tax being paid, but it will be tax at a full rate. So that's what's going to mean. So it's for lower income people, it's going to mean good. For those who are at a higher tax bracket, it's going to mean higher taxation.
The arbitrage between dividends and buybacks in that sense also goes away.
Goes away, absolutely.
Well,
except Dinesh, what if, are they going to tax buyback on long-term holding as capital gains, or the tax? Because if they are going to tax it in the hands of the individual and it is then taxed as capital gains tax, then the 20 comes down to 12.5. Because today the company is paying a tax at 20%.
I don't think she said that. We have to look at the fine print.
I know, but if it's going to be taxed in the hands of the individual, it has to be taxed in the individual as the character.
Yeah.
And if the character is long-term, it doesn't matter whether you buy it or the company buys it. If the character is long-term, then it will be 12.5%. So then there's a gain.
Okay.
The company was paying 20, the individual would be paying 12.
Ashok, as Lata says, we have to see the fine print.
Yes.
You're right, actually. It's not long-term or short-term, it's the characterization. So if the characterization is capital gain, then obviously whatever is the capital gains treatment will apply. If it is treated as normal income, then we have a challenge.
Okay.
So we'll have to examine.
The budget papers are still not loaded.
Yeah.
So we will wait for more clarity, and you guys, I guess, will be on your phones till you get that clarity. But let's get to the market expert. Madhu Kela of MK Ventures joins us now. Madhu, okay, we also have Sunil Singhania of Abacus Asset Management, more experts joining us shortly. Madhu, first thoughts, the market's worst fears realized with short-term capital gains going up to 20%. Yes, Madhu.
Lata, I can't hear you properly.
Okay, it's just that STCG gone up to 20%.
Yeah, I think this is completely not in expected lines. I don't think any market participant in that sense was expecting a change in the short-term capital gains as well as in the long-term capital gains regime. And also the STT is being actually increased. So, and the buyback taxation, if it is moved from company to the individual and there is no charge to the company, then it will be incrementally positive. But by and large, to me, in a lighter sense, looks like the market wants the government markets to cool off. The government wants markets to cool off. While the fiscal math was all adding, this was not the basic expectation of the taxation increase. And already, Rata, markets have run off very hard in the last few months. So some kind of a correction because of this is not overruled, and that is what the markets are showing off.
Well, the markets have recovered coming off those intraday lows. But let me bring Sunil in. Sunil, Madhu is saying the market wasn't expecting this, but the speculation was rife, especially over the last few weeks, that something has got to give as far as the capital gains regime is concerned. It has now been put forward in the budget, and of course, fine print is awaited. Sunil, your first reaction to what we've seen the finance minister deliver?
I think the market reacts based on expectations and what actually comes out. So I would tend to agree that there was hardly anyone who was expecting any change in the capital gain regime, at least in this budget, because we are only 6 months away from the next budget, right? So I think to that extent, there has been a disappointment. And the other thing is uncertainty on this buyback tax, because the intention of the finance minister maybe was that dividend tax and buyback tax. There was a difference in tax treatment, and buybacks were getting maybe a slightly more benefit in terms of lower taxes. So we have to see the fine print, but obviously when something is not expected, the market definitely reacts. And anyway, I think over the last 10-15 days, market was showing signs of cooling off, at least the broader market. So while the Nifty was not showing signs, the broader markets was clearly showing signs of overheating. So it's a combination of two factors, I would say.
That the fiscal deficit has come down arithmetically to 4.9. So at a macro level, that is a positive, but that doesn't mean they're going to borrow less. The borrowing was originally 14.1. That's just come down to 14.01. So they're going to borrow the same amount of money, but yes, for the arithmetic, it's 4.9. Go ahead, Prashant.
Absolutely. I mean, look at don't lose sight of the index, the market as well. We had fallen about 400 points on the Nifty, and it's a 250 odd point recovery since. So is it going to be as powerful recovery as we've seen after the election shock? Some have of course said no, but this is too early. I mean, this is the first knee-jerk kind of reaction which is coming in, and I think it'll take time for it to kind of sort of seep through and markets to find an appropriate kind of level. Prashant Khemka is also with us. Prashant, I'm going to come to you. Madhu, but what is your sense? I mean, as I said, this is immediate kind of market reaction, but is this going to do slightly more lasting damage? Or, as you said, government wants markets to cool off. Will it cool off?
I do not think it will be a lasting damage or anything of that kind, Prashant. It doesn't change the medium and long-term outlook of Indian economy or the stock market per se. I think the government, in other sense, has done quite a lot for agriculture, for job creation. There is a lot in the finer print. They have retained the capital expenditure as budgeted in the interim budget. See why there is a knee-jerk reaction, because this, at least I was not expecting, because see, when we went into the budget, in 30 years of my career, I have not seen a more better financial position of any government or any budget which being presented, when because of the RBI dividend and because of the higher taxation, the government fiscal situation was really in a very sound path. So this was not expected. There is some knee-jerk reaction, but I don't think it changes any trajectory, or it will bring in any meaningful correction in the market just because we have slightly higher capital gains taxation.
Okay.
Sunil, you want to sort of come in on that point? I mean, today the reaction is the reaction because it's a surprise, but do you think we'll have a sort of lingering kind of impact, or the market just moves on?
No, so if you go back, Prashant, when long-term capital gains tax was introduced, to 10% from 0%, we did have an impact in the market. But then the market started taking it on its stride, because ultimately you're paying capital gains on the gains you are making. So I would agree that at least on this point, the market will take it on its strides. But there are a lot of things which we have to understand, whether there will be a grandfathering like the ones which we did earlier, or is there a date from which this is going to be applicable, whether it is going to be applicable from day one, or whether, it's going to be applicable after a month. So if that would be the case, then there would be obviously some pressure, because investors would like to book their gains at lower tax rates. So I think let us see the fine print. But I think the markets were clearly overheated, and some cool off for some reason was necessitated. And basically, maybe this is the reason why markets would cool down a little bit. So I would say that it would not sort of collapse per se. Maybe they will spend some time here, but I would not expect either a big correction or a V-shaped recovery.
And any stock preferences, sector preferences, Sunil, after you heard the budget, any stock sector preferences?
I don't think there is anything, which is sort of a surprise as far as positives or negatives in the budget is concerned. I think we were all expecting a focus on infra to continue, focus on housing, obviously focus on giving more to the middle class, which they have done by way of reduced taxes. So I think everything has been online. I don't think, except for some minor tweaks here and there in terms of import duties, it's the same as it was earlier.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Sunil.
Let's begin Prashant Khemka as well. He's waiting by.
That's what I was
and he manages a lot of foreign money. Prashant, good to have you with us here. From an attractiveness point of view, purely on a taxation regime basis, how does this capital gains tax increase count, I mean, in your opinion?
Certainly, Prashant, like every budget, it has some puts and takes, and maybe from an investor perspective, this budget, after a few budgets, is a bit more negative, I would say, on the taxation front in particular. There was some expectation that long-term capital gains tax might be increased, but with indexation benefit. So today what we've seen is that there isn't an indexation benefit, and plus it, I think, increases the risk. In a way, there was a stability in the capital gains regime for the last several years. Now the long-term gains tax has been raised by only 2.5%, short-term raised to 20%, but this increases the risk in investors' mind that it could be not a a given tax regime for next many years. It is possible that this could be inching up higher again at some point in time. So that I would say is negative, but that is the primary negative of the budget. There are several positives as well, most particularly on the review of the tax code, which hopefully would simplify and make it easier to comply with.
Okay. Prashant, hi. Thank you for joining us on the show. So this, of course, is the knee-jerk reaction that we're seeing on the markets right now. And it has come as a negative surprise, and hence the market is factoring in. But, you know, as Sunil was also mentioning a while back, this may not change the medium-term outlook for the market, because at the end of the day, you are paying capital gains tax on gains in the market, which have been aplenty over the last many years. So if this dip continues because of the reaction to these changes, would you suggest a buy on dip strategy is a good approach? I mean, would you buy the dip that we're seeing in the market right now?
So certainly taxes are on gains only. I mean, you don't, on the other hand, you don't recoup anything on your losses. So, you know, net, it is hard to paint it as a positive. But on the knee-jerk reaction or not, yes, I mean, taxes, I don't think ever have had a lasting impact. As Sunil and Madhur pointed out, and we all know the markets have been somewhat of a heady, progression over the last 2 years, up 60%, 2 years up 30% or so. These are not like normal returns from the market. So, regardless of the budget, one could have reasonably expected markets to be more normal going forward, which is deliver high single-digit, low double-digit returns. So this would not, whatever reaction the market has to have to this tax, would be done either today or by tomorrow. Regardless of market reaction, I think the point remains that the expectation was not there of a capital gains hike without indexation benefit in this budget.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, I'm going to come to the tax experts as well, but I think Madhu, make a point.
Yeah, Prashant, I just got a message. I hope it is right, that this capital gains taxation calculation, as Sunil was saying, is on a prospective basis and it is not applicable to securities held before this budget announcement today. So whatever you buy after today will be applicable on a long-term capital gains and short-term capital gains. So it is some relief. It is not applicable, hopefully, to the shares being held before this date.
Now, that's.
I hope this message is right.
No,
I'll pray for it.
We will.
It is right.
I think everyone will prefer it. It's on a prospective basis and not a retrospective basis, and we'll sort of look at the fine print in just a bit. But I think Nilesh Shah is also with us. Nilesh bhai, okay, I think we'll just go to him in a bit. Ashok, the point about prospectiveness. I mean,
historically, it's always been point of sale.
Yeah.
So if you go with the point of sale, it doesn't matter whether you bought it before or after. I would believe that consistency is unlikely to have changed.
Okay.
But let's look at the fine print. I mean, who knows? They may have just brought in a specific. But Dinesh will make an important point on dividend. I had said that it's likely that buyback could be treated as capital gains. That clarification has come. It will be treated as dividend.
So they have actually specifically amended the law to say that any buyback income will be treated as dividends.
income.
And therefore, virtually it kills buyback because for higher income.
Okay, and so it's treated at the slab rate.
Absolutely.
I'm seeing quite a few. I mean, too early to comment on all the fine print, but as I was going through, one of the things, for example, in the pharma industry, we see is that there are litigation on infringement of patents and things like that.
Yeah.
And then you do a settlement. Now that settlement payments are treated as non-deductible because it is treated as infraction of law. So it's a number of fine prints. I could see quite a few things.
Okay. We'll come to that. At the moment, the market is kind of recovering from the big blow. It was down about 3%, the mid-cap index in particular. Now still down about 1.3%. But I think people are more playing profit booking or profit taking, as the case may be. I think we will have to give it the budget that it has tried to ameliorate some of the important long-term work. For instance, trying to encourage corporate apprenticeship of newcomers. You know, the benefits that they are providing if you hire new employees. I think up to 1 crore youth could benefit. So there are these long-term benefits. Macroeconomically, the deficit is down. Maybe in the days to come, that would mean a rating upgrade for India because we are rapidly bringing down our fiscal deficit. You cannot take away from these macro positives in terms of what is done for employment and what is in terms of what is done for macro health of the economy. But at the moment, we are focused on the capital gains, and therefore the market is reacting the way it is reacting. Madhu Kela, any sector preferences at this point in time after what you heard in the budget?
Yeah, Lata is live back to normal in my view. I think this is now these days budget do not have a more than 48-hour lifeline, and because the reforms are carried throughout the year, I would continue to focus on bottom-up stock investing opportunities. I think agriculture could be one interesting sector to look at it. One will have to read the fine print, but there will be some beneficiary on the agriculture sector and also on the broader economic front, because they have retained the capital expenditure plan which was being outlaid in the interim budget. So Lata, it will be a story not of a real any big sector, but bottom-up stock picking going forward.
Yeah, I just want to come in here and bring Nilesh into the conversation as well. And while we're talking about the negative impact of the tax announcements that have come in, there have been many positive announcements that have come in as well. Abolishing the angel tax, which is a big one for the venture capital and the angel tax community for the startup ecosystem. The equalization levy, by the way, has also been done away with it. What was popularly called Google tax, that's been done away with as well. There is a TDS cut even as far as e-commerce platforms are concerned. So there is a lot actually on the tax front. And of course, the benefits to taxpayers, to the salaried class, if they move to the new tax regime. The finance minister holding out a number of about 17,500 rupees by way of savings. But Nilesh, on balance, as far as the big numbers are concerned, it's the same. It's pretty much status quo when we talk about CapEx, when we talk about the rural spends, etc. Food subsidy, that number flashing on our screens. And of course, we will go over the fine print of many of those schemes that were announced. By the way, the MSME scheme, and I think the bank stocks reacted to that as well, because this was a proposal, it was a demand made by the MSME sector in terms of credit guarantee and especially not counting them as an NPA when they were SMAs. So there's been plenty that's been announced as far as the SME sector is concerned. But let me go across to Mr. Amitabh Kant as well. He joins us now for the first reaction from the government's end. Mr. Kant, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us. The budget is now delivered. There's plenty there on the tax front. Some of the concerns there with respect to long-term capital gains and the changes that have been announced. But on balance, the message is one of continuity. The message is one of macroeconomic stability. Your first reaction, Mr. Kant?
So, Shireen, I think the focus really is on growth with huge emphasis on employment. I think the important thing is to, if, as the economic survey said, if you have to create 8 million jobs a year, these new schemes on employment, that first-time employees to get their 1 month salary, or the second one, both employer and employees to benefit, and secondly, from their EPFO account, and thirdly, for the employers again to benefit. And then a new scheme for skilling, the centrally sponsored scheme for skilling, and to my mind, this internship with about 500 top companies. All these are path-breaking measures to my mind in terms of employment. But the other big thing too is the focus on urban development, creating growth centers next to 100 cities, creating industrial parks next to the 12 industrial parks, because if you want to create good quality jobs, it's not through subsidization. That'll come through manufacturing and through urbanization, and that's very important. And the third is the focus on energy transition, which is very important, and this emphasis on pumped storage, for which to my mind there's huge potential, and small modular reactor, because these are cutting-edge technology where India has to leapfrog. And, this doing away with the angel tax for startups is again a path-breaking move. So other than the stock market may look at the tax on the long-term investments, etc., stock market, but from a perspective of growth, from the perspective of employment, from the perspective of research and innovation and urban development, it's quite a remarkable budget.
Yes, we will have to see the fine print of those schemes that were announced specifically for employment. The good news is that they have linked that to the EPFO enrollment for the formal sector. But Mr. Kant, two questions I have specifically for you. Yesterday, the economic survey made it very clear that, look, corporates are sitting on record profitability. Corporate profitability has quadrupled in the last 3 years, and it is now time for the private sector to take up the baton. And if you look at the capex number, the ask and the expectation was that the government needs to do better than the interim budget, but that's not the case. It's status quo on capex. So the message that the government seems to be sending out is, we've done our part, and now the private sector needs to pick up the pace. But in that transition period, do you envisage some hiccups on growth, Mr. Kant?
So, Shireen, taking it from 1% to 3.4% is a huge amount. And if you look at it, the government in the last 3 to 4 years has really pushed all its resources into capex spend. And to my mind, it continues to do that at 3.4%. But it's also time now for the private sector investment to kick in a big way. And to my mind, that was impacted because of the COVID, but it has started kicking in, and it will drive greater impetus with this budget. So I envisage that in the coming years, in a lot of sectors, particularly the PLI related sectors, you will see a lot of fresh investments coming in. And I don't think we need to worry on that count. The government has really done its best. To stick on to 3.4% capex itself is a very huge thing. And yet to bring down your fiscal deficit to 4.9%. That, to my mind, is a remarkable thing, that you are saying 4.9%, you'll bring it down to 4.5%. You're really laying down the glide path for the fiscal deficit in the budget, which in the long run is very critical for the Indian economy.
Mr. Kant, a valid point that you make there. I will address the PLI issue with you in just a second, but let me get Madhu Kela back into the conversation. Madhu, from a consumption point of view and the changes that the government has brought in to try and provide some sweetness to and some relief to the salaried class, what do you believe that that's going to result in as far as the consumption cycle is concerned, if anything at all?
I think it will argue very well for the consumption cycle, Sareen. Any which way we are coming off from a 2-3 year kind of low, wherein because of inflation concern and because of unemployment concern, there has been some kind of a consumption slowdown. And in a way, market is validating. If you see the uptick in a lot of consumption related companies over the last 1.5, 2 months, a lot of companies have gained ground. So I think this budget as a whole, if there was really no tinkering of this short-term and long-term capital gains, I think markets would have really celebrated, because there is, as Mr. Kant was saying, there is a lot of positives in the budget, and there are a lot of positives in the fine print, and the unemployment issue is really being addressed as much as I could hear and understand. That there will be a lot of job creation opportunities for the youth going forward, which will argue very well for the broad-based recovery of the economy and also of the consumption-related sector going forward.
Gentlemen, just for the benefit of all of our viewers, you had asked for that clarification. Sunil had asked for it, or I think Madhu specifically. The STT hike is effective from the 23rd of July. So basically, it's effective from today. The hike as far as the securities transaction taxes, the STT hike has come in from the 23rd of July. I would imagine that's the case for some of the other tax changes that have been announced as well. So that's the clarification coming in, effective the 23rd of July. But Mr. Kant, coming back now to the measures as far as the manufacturing sector is concerned, and I guess you will need to see this holistically in light of what has happened on the customs duty side, in light of what has happened on the announcements on the industrial parks, MSMEs and so on and so forth as well. But the expectation was more PLI schemes would be introduced, especially for labor-intensive sectors. That's not been the case. Your comments on that?
So I think the best thing, to my mind, Shireen, the finance minister has done is not to spread the PLI thin. An important thing is that the PLI is meant to create large champions, big champions. And PLI should be limited to 14 sectors. We must ensure success, as we've done in the case of electronics, in the other 13 sectors. PLI should never be spread thin. That is not a long-term solution. The long-term solution is to make India a very highly competitive nation. It should become very easy, simple. It must become the most cost-competitive nation in the world. That is what the budget aims at. PLI is meant for 5 years if you go big, bigger, bigger, and biggest. But it's not a solution for inefficiencies. The government is trying to address macro inefficiencies in our economy. We must get that right. And therefore, I'm really, really grateful to the finance minister that she's not spread out the PLI thin.
Mr. Kant, coming back to you in just a second, sir, but we do have more clarifications with regards to the capital gains tax. Lata, the fine print, what do we know now?
Yeah, there was an understanding, and I want Madhu Kela to listen in to this. There was an expectation that the short-term capital gains increase will only apply to shares purchased here on. Dinesh Kanabar clarifies, no, it applies to all shares that you hold, and it will apply from whatever sales you do from today. Mr. Kanabar.
Actually, the entire income for the year will be taxed at 12.5%. So it's income arising after 1st April 24. Okay. If you have made a long-term capital gain, the rate will be not 10 but 12.5%.
And
likewise for short term
as well.
Absolutely.
And on real estate, Mr. Kanabar, can you just...
The period of holding has been reduced from 36 months to 24 months, which again is a very... I think what the finance minister has done is she has taken the suggestion of simplification very seriously. So instead of having multiple holding periods for multiple class of assets, she has put financial asset on one side, other assets on the other side, and put up a common structure
and
for
financial assets, it's 12 months?
Yeah.
All other assets are 24 months?
That's right.
I wonder if there will be some impact on realty
What we
stocks.
don't know is, given that this budget is being presented on July 23rd, whether gains made between April and July. So if I sold something in this financial year between April and July, is that 10% or 12.5%? It will be 12.5%. So in a sense,
it is retrospective. It's opposite of what Madhu is saying.
Versus Madhu saying that this is prospective. It is actually, so STT is prospective.
STT is prospective, but STCG and LTCG.
Both short-term capital gains and long-term capital gains is effective April 1, 2024.
Fair
enough.
Sense,
and just to clarify, it is always so. So for example, even the last interim budget, 2018, the surcharge was increased substantially. That was the budget where it went to 41%. It applied to all income from 1st April.
April 1st.
So to that extent, it does become retrospective, and that can't be helped.
Madhu, you want to come in quickly, respond? Okay, I think we don't have Madhu. Nilesh is with us of Kotak Mahindra Asset Management. Nilesh bhai, good to have you back. Your first thoughts on what's been done on the capital gains tax side?
So essentially, if we look at capital gains, they were removed and STT was levied. Then in 2018, capital gains came back, and now the rates have been increased. The amounts are not going to be more than 20,000-30,000 crore by way of collection. And if we include the revised increase limit from 1 lakh rupee to 1,25,000 rupee, then even that collection will come down. Now, clearly for such a small amount, was there a need to increase this taxes? I think this could have been achieved by creating level playing field between foreign investors and Indian investors. When Indian investors trade in derivatives, it's business income and it gets taxed at applicable slab rates. When foreign investors trade in derivatives, it is considered as capital gain. And there are so many high-frequency traders trading in our market, making tons of money and paying no taxes. It would have been better to tax them and create a level playing for investors and get the same amount of money. Even the proposal on buyback of shares. Now, you are saying that if a company does buyback, we will shift the tax to the recipients. What if the company is doing buyback in the market? How will I know I have sold to the company or in the market? So clearly there are certain changes which have some nuances, and this could have been handled in a better manner from a market point of view.
Dinesh, apart from the taxation part, what else in the budget stood out for you? And from a market standpoint, given that we've seen a dip, what is your recommendation now? Should one use this opportunity to buy into the market?
Sonia, I think the biggest benefit or positive of budget was fiscal consolidation. FY20 fiscal deficit was estimated at 5.8%. We are starting FY25 at 4.9%. That's 90 basis point consolidation without taking into account tax buoyancy. My feeling is that the tax collection will be higher than what is estimated in the budget, as the June quarter advanced tax collection is running at a higher level. Second, it is also committing fiscal consolidation going ahead. 4.5 for FY26 and debt to GDP ratio to remain lower thereafter. I think fiscal consolidation, fiscal prudence is the most important part of this budget.
Okay. You know, I want to make 2 points. One is this STT bit, which is going to be rolled out immediately. Will it be an issue for brokers, etc.? Because they got to calculate it, right, at a different rate, almost immediately from, I don't know.
So they will have to simply change the software.
That's easy. It's already done probably.
Okay. And the other one is, I want to point out what ITC is doing right now. ITC is up 4.5%. Okay. And that is the single biggest sort of mover. I mean, it's not the change which has happened for ITC, it's a change which has not happened. I think it's adding about 40, 50 index points to the Nifty. And that's the reason why the market has recovered actually quite sharply. So just wanted to make that point as well.
1 minute. There's a clarification, Mr. Kanabar and Ashok Wadhwa in particular. The higher capital gains tax kicks in from today.
So from July, sales from July.
Yeah, sales from July 23rd.
So it is
Page 6 on the explanatory memorandum, it's a message that we've got from Ridham Desai. So he says he has seen that page, and therefore sales here on, and the previous 4 months sales will not be taxed at 12.5%, but it will be taxed at 10%. Prashant Khemka has been patiently waiting by. Thank you so much for your patience, Prashant. Well, this is also a Bihar Viksit budget, you will have to say, and an Andhra Viksit budget. And also I want to give credit to the government. You know, 11.1 lakh crore is a very good capex budget. If it has not been increased, it is because there are only 6 more months to spend that money, and there is no point increasing that. So maybe we should not be too unfair to the government. 11.1 lakh crore is a very good capex budget. But anyway, is there anything on the capital goods side that attracts you, Prashant? What exactly makes you attracts you in the market today?
No, I think other than the topic that we've discussed at length, which is the capital gains tax, which is negative, but I think overall, otherwise, it is a good budget of continuity. The prior budgets have all been very well welcomed by the market because they had all essentially the same ingredients as the budget today, except for the capital gains tax, right? So the rest of the elements, including the capital expenditure, as you pointed out, there's 6 months left, there'll be new budget. No, I don't think there are particular expectations of revising upwards that number from the February budget. So that's as it is. On the consumption side, yes, the heavier emphasis on rural development and on job creation should be beneficial for consumption overall. And most particularly what I'm excited about and hopefully maybe somewhat wishful think we should make considerable progress on, and if Ashok or Dinesh have some comments on that, is the review of the tax code.
What did you want clarification on?
So the review of tax code, how it sounded like very material to me. And simplification, ease of doing business, also the fine print on gift city, because in passing, the FM did mention that taxes have been reduced and simplified or something to that effect for the gift city. That would be very important to see in the fine print.
I would just respond to that very quickly. I think that it's a very important point, and sometimes you tend to miss in the light of this capital gains thing. So there was a request that the TDS rates be unified. That has been done. There was a request that TCS, one should not wait for a refund. It should be allowed to be set off against TDS. That has happened. So number of changes. So on TDS, on capital gains tax, on charity, again, I had to study all of it. So, and what she is saying is that these are the changes I'm introducing here and now, and all the other changes I'm going to review. And in 6 months, which means that the next budget is also going to be a lot about taxes.
Okay, I just want to make it clear what Dinesh has said. It's a very important point that Mr. Kanabar is making. we were all worried that if you say you bought a foreign travel ticket on a credit card, you had a TCS of 20% on it, and you had to wait for the next end of the year to claim that back. Now it will be claimed in your next salary payment itself. Correct. Which is very efficient. After all, the idea was to catch those who are having foreign travels and credit card payments but not paying tax. So, this cleaning up the process is extremely important. But Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw is with us, the executive chairperson of Biocon and Biocon Biologics. Kiran, thank you immensely for sparing time. What were the first takeaways for you?
Well, everyone has touched upon all the various, financial and capital allocations and tax, slabs. But I'd like to really shift gears and really focus on a couple of areas which I thought were very positive indicators of how the government is looking at economic development. One, of course, is about the startup sector and the kind of, allocation of budgetary spending is being looked at, especially, I think the startup sector has much to cheer about when it comes to the abolition of the angel tax. But apart from that, I'm glad to see that even at the rural level, you've got the Mudra scheme also that's looking at entrepreneurship. You're looking at a large, fillip for the startup sector in many, many ways in terms of ease of doing business. And in the case of our sector, I was heartened to at least hear an announcement that research and innovation is going to be a big focus for the government. How they've actually set aside 1 lakh crore as a budgetary allocation for private sector research, but we need to read the fine print. How is this going to be deployed? How is this going to be converted into incentivizing industry, et cetera, Yeah. So overall, I think, like everyone's been saying, I think no one expected a huge change from what was announced earlier this year. I think they're trying to build momentum, and at least, everything is moving in the right direction. That's how I would put it.
Okay, point.
Right. I just want to highlight one more thing. Gold, right? I mean, gold has seen changes. So the total incidence of tax, including GST, has gone from some 18%, has gone down to about 9% or so. And look at what some of these stocks are doing.
Basic customs duty is down to 6%.
Correct. Titan is up 6%. Senco is up 10%. That entire sector. I mean, I think expectation is that this will actually spur sort of gold sales and demand, etc., in a meaningful way. So we'll have those stocks up in just a bit. But I wanted, Mr. Vadva, your thoughts on real estate, that threshold being brought down from 36 to 24 months. What will it do to for the sector? What will it mean?
Obviously, it's very good. I mean, not only 36 comes down to 24, but the rates are also aligned, which means that for long-term capital gains tax now, there's one rate, 12.5%.
Which is 12.5%.
12.5%. So you are paying long-term.
So if I sell my house now, the capital gains I'll pay will be
12.5% versus your
original of
20%. Of 20%.
Okay,
no, short-term was long-term was 20% plus the surcharge. Okay. There's just one other clarification that you need to bear in mind. So when buyback happens, earlier the company paid the tax, but the individual did not pay the tax. Now it will be taxed as dividend in the hands of the individual. But then the question is, what happens to the cost?
Okay.
That cost will be treated as a loss and will be allowed as a set-off against your capital gain.
That's a bit of a relief, big relief.
That's a big relief.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Anish Shah is with us. Mr. Shah, before I hand you over to Shireen, the last statement you made before we went into the finance minister's speech was that something should be done for skilling and employment. And there is a fairly good scheme for 1 crore youth employed. Corporates get some kind of a benefit for formalizing those jobs. What's your first reaction?
So first reaction is very positive. We see this as a growth-oriented budget that meets various different factors that we would want from an industry perspective.
Right, Anish, let's get down to some of the specifics. And we didn't hear it in the finance minister's speech, and I don't know whether this is going to be part of that green transition plan and roadmap that the government says is work in progress and will be announced. But no FAME 3 in the speech so far. We still have to go over the budget documents to see if there is an allocation there. Anish, what do you make of that?
So, Shireen, we were not expecting FAME 3 in the budget itself. All indications that we had received was that that would be done separately as part of the normal course from the various ministries. So this is not something that we were expecting in the budget.
Okay, so you weren't expecting FAME 3 in the budget, but on balance, in terms of what the government has done, continuity on the big numbers, in fact, pretty much staying intact with the interim budget projections, as well as some of the changes brought in, relief for the salaried class, some of the tax changes on the simplification side, and of course on capital gains, the changes that have already been discussed in detail by our tax experts. But on balance, what would be your biggest takeaway from what this budget has managed to achieve?
On balance, Shireen, it's staying the course. It is a growth-oriented budget that focuses on inclusive growth. There is a strong element of simplification and ease of doing business. And if I were to look at it from a FICCI perspective, it really meets all the priorities that FICCI and the industry had laid out, which is around Make in India, women-led development, farm prosperity, and sustainability.
Specifically on the manufacturing side, and I want to link this to the job creation schemes that have been highlighted by the government, and link this also to what they have decided to do to nurture and bolster MSMEs. What, from an overall holistic manufacturing perspective, Anish, how much does this change things? How much does the compass move on account of the many measures announced by the budget on jobs, on industrial parks, on supporting MSMEs, on access to credit?
Shireen, it's a significant step forward in terms of developing India as a manufacturing hub. The focus on infrastructure, the focus on capex continuing to be at 3.4% of GDP, the focus on jobs, because that's going to be, skilling is going to be an important aspect for India to become the manufacturing hub. And that combined with the short-term stimulus on demand through tax break for salaried, which is to the tune of 17,500 rupees. I think all of those things are positive from a manufacturing standpoint and are the right steps to be able to really make India the manufacturing hub for the world.
Nilesh, let me come back to you now. While we go over the fine print, again, in terms of some of the policy announcements, for instance, PM Awas, etc., also the allocation not being announced, saying that we will put that number down. Many other such work in progress, including the income tax simplification. That was, of course, a big positive that has been spoken of. Nilesh, to your mind, outside of the tax-related changes, the 3 or 4 big ticket items that you take away from this?
So one, the fiscal consolidation, that's really big and positive. Second, import duty cut on gold. Today, gold returns are included with 18% tax incidence. Tomorrow, that will be included with 6% or 9% tax incidence. And that will take away some return of gold and hopefully allocation to gold. The third thing, which is very good, is related to new pension scheme. The employees' contribution has been upped from 10% to 14%. I hope and pray every employee takes advantage of NPS. Not only they secure their future, but it also cultivates long-term investment habit. And one more thing from a market point of view is safe harbor clause review. Today, so many of Indians are managing money into India from outside jurisdiction of India. We don't benefit in any way. And we allow other countries like Singapore and Dubai to develop as a regional financial center. The finance minister, in our pre-budget consultation, we had requested Honorable Finance Minister to look at safe harbor clause. And I'm very glad that it has been announced in the budget. Hopefully, next time Prashant Khimka will be in studio and not giving from outside of India.
Okay, good point, Nilesh. There is a doubt about whether indexation has been removed for property. Would that be at all done?
I mean, I think it's
an error.
So if they brought the tax rate down to 12.5%, I would be surprised.
They would remove indexation altogether?
Altogether. So there are 2 changes.
Okay.
One is that there was an arbitrage on interest. So if you had debentures
Even a
or
house
bonds,
you bought for like maybe, 30 lakhs or something back in the 90s or back in the 80s would now be worth several crores. You mean the,
So there are
the 12% will apply on that level?
So two changes. The first is that if you have any interest yielding asset, debentures or bonds, what you could do up to now is that you would have interest maybe back-ended, sell it and make capital gains.
Yes.
To remove that, they have now said that bonds and debentures, if you sell, the income will be short-term capital gain, even if you held it for a period
Fair
of more
enough.
than 2.
No, I'm more worried about the property bit.
Yeah. So it's not just property. On all asset classes, indexation seems to have been removed for sales after July.
Okay, now that's a big one. We'll have to ask realty companies and even individuals. I think whatever you got, the paltry gain you make in terms of capital gains limit being raised from 1 lakh to 1,25,000 is more than wiped out.
Or the rate coming down.
Or the rate coming down gets wiped out with this.
Yeah.
But Nilesh made a very important point about the macros and that 4.9% fiscal deficit. It's very good to see that 4 handle on the deficit after a very long time, after maybe 4 or 5 years. Does that put us in line for an upgrade, Nilesh? I mean, is this a very big step towards a very long journey, of course?
So, Lata, I will start with a lighter vein and then let Sajid answer it in a serious way.
Okay.
Well, the rating agencies are saying that we are Moody's and we have poor standards. To expect from them a rating upgrade will be a bit difficult with these numbers in a track record of not defaulting since Mohenjo-daro days.
Okay.
I'm sure rating agencies will require long-term track record to upgrade India's credit rating. 5,000 years is not good enough.
No, Nikhil, Nilesh, see, we have to live with what we have. So there's no point, trying to,
that's why I said
compare
serious
people.
Sajid will answer.
So we also have to remember that compared to all other BBB minus countries, we have a higher fiscal deficit and a much higher fiscal deficit. But that's a different debate for a different day with a different audience. Sajid Chinoy has joined us. Sajid, all the big numbers are with you. What would your take be? Fiscal deficit down?
I would say macroeconomically very prudent, very sound, right? So the deficit, as you said, the center is below 5 at 4.9. Importantly, center and states combined in FY25 should be below 8% for the first time in 5 years. Now that's meaningful. Number 2, this is a good balance between saving and spending. Compared to the interim budget, the government had about 0.5% of GDP in extra resources, both taxes and the RBI dividend. And that's been split very well. It's a half of that has gone towards more consolidation and lower deficit, and half of that has gone towards revenue expenditure, which I think was needed. Number 3, the assumptions and taxes, very conservative. Last year, on a nominal GDP of 9.6, gross taxes grew 13.5%. This year, nominal GDP is pegged at 10.5, which is fair enough. And on that, we're just assuming gross tax growth of 10.6%. So it's 10.8%. So it's just barely over 1. Now, to be fair, there are many tax changes, so we need to account for how much that adds or subtracts. But prima facie, the assumptions and taxes are extremely conservative and could surprise to the upside. And the last thing I'll say is, there's a lot of focus on what's happening in financial markets. I think we should step back and look at the important things this budget has done on plumbing. For me in particular, focusing on employment, focusing on skilling, focusing on cutting import duty so exports become more important, focusing on reforming direct taxes so that we've got more space for higher expenditure. These are the plumbing issues that I think we'll grow to appreciate over time.
I completely take your point on employment. If this really fires, if corporate India is able to take advantage of the SOPs given so that you hire newer employees, and those SOPs are available for the next 4 years for 1 crore employees, then we've definitely inched up on formalization of employment and employment per se. So full credit to the government for those. And the benefits of that are only going to be reaped in the years to come. Employment, an employer cannot start employing more new people simply because 4,000 rupees is available per new employee. But nevertheless, it is one small step, and it will perhaps help mid-cap companies. Mr. Anisha, you've perhaps gone through the budget and thought over it in greater detail. Do you think this moves the needle on employment?
I think it's a good step because it starts signaling that we should be looking at growth with jobs, with skilling. And even if you were to take it as here's an amount that's given for skilling new folks coming in and making it easier for companies to employ faster, I think that's a positive step. So therefore, It's not going to change a decision to employ based on what was mentioned earlier, especially for larger companies, because that's going to be based on growth, on capex, etc. But I think this does make it easier and pave the road for us to be able to start looking at jobs and skilling in a much bigger way.
Okay, fair point. Once again, I would say that we wouldn't fault the government for not increasing the capex budget, because you have only 6 months left, and increasing money, and the capex budget was not met. Capex expenditure was not met in the April-May numbers, which we already have, for the simple reason that the government was busy. Several bills would not have been passed by the departments concerned, and therefore not increasing the budget this year is okay, but 1.5 lakh crore has been given as interest-free grant, 50-year interest-free loans to the states, and therefore that kind of capex can continue. Shireen, you have some questions?
Oh, well, that's right. We do have our panel here, the top brass of CII with us. Sanjeev Puri, CB, many thanks for joining us. ITC, the stock of the moment, the last time I checked, it was up by about 4%. So that should certainly be good news for you, Mr. Puri. But let's talk about the budget on balance now. Many of the things that we talked about in terms of continuity, in terms of stability, especially macroeconomic stability, the budget has clearly and squarely delivered on that. Some of the ideas, and a lot of this will boil down to finally execution as well. But on the job creation front, because again, the compact with industry is what the government is hoping for. Do you believe that this will incentivize industry to hire more, or do you believe that, look, there has to be a business case for industry to hire? The incentives may not move the needle much.
Okay, let me first start by saying it's quite a commendable budget, because it's really looked at the issues of jobs, as you've spoken about. It's looked at in depth about rural and agriculture, issues of climate change. At the same time, very important focus on, the journey for the next phase of transformation, next generation reforms, a lot of work on ease of doing business, and a lot of, coordination with state and incentivization with state, looking at a lot of important issues of natural resources like water, land, and all of that. So extremely, extremely good. Now, coming to this specific question on livelihood. Now, of course, there has to be no doubt a business case, but what is required is that the economic transformation continues, which is what the policy continuity and additional interventions will do, and all these incentives reduce one element of the factor cost. So it does kind of add some impetus to the whole employment situation. But more importantly, I think what is going to lead to more livelihood creation is also the very strong focus on skilling. Yeah. And this whole ideas of top 500 companies, apprenticeships, and a lot of other schemes are there within education and skilling. I think those are very important, because today we are also sitting on opportunities which are not filled in a timely fashion because there's a mismatch in skills. So I think that itself on its own will lead to job creation.
So your biggest idea or your biggest takeaway from the budget?
I think it's very comprehensive, and it addresses this whole area of economic transformation for livelihood and for fighting climate emergency quite well within macro stability.
And we need to see the roadmap as far as the green transition is concerned. Welcome to Mr. Mukundan as well, and Rajiv Memani, you're back. You stuck your neck out and said you believe this will be the budget that will move on capital gains, and that's what's happened. The expectation was that they wouldn't do both short-term as well as long-term. Both have happened. Go over the fine print for us, and what to your mind will be the implications and any clarifications that you believe are needed.
Yeah. I haven't gone through the fine print as yet, but I can, from whatever I've made out from the budget speech and a few paras here and there, I would say that you can break the tax thing into 4 sort of buckets. One, I think, is there has been a focus on simplification. So whether it's announcing that they will come out with a new tax code by next year,
next 6 months,
Vivad se Vishwas, and then on TDS, providing TDS credit and everything else. The reassessment thing is a big thing. So I think there are many things. The second, obviously, is capital gains, which on long-term capital gains, the rate's gone from 10 to 12.5%, on listed equity, 15 to 20%. At the same time, for land, it's come from 20% down to 12.5%, although indexation has been done away with.
So that's the clarification that we were hoping for. And Prashant, Lata Surabhi, Rajiv Memani confirming that the indexation for real estate has been done away with, even though the tax has been reduced to 12.5%, the indexation benefit has been done away with. Go ahead, Rajiv.
And buyback tax, which has been changed, but the way they have said is it will not be treated as capital gains in the hands. Earlier, company was paying buyback tax. It will be treated as dividend income, and the cost that they have, that will be treated as an expense against that. So I think that's a logical way of doing that. So I think that on the capital gain side, debt-oriented mutual funds will be happier. So on the capital gain side and on REIT and InvITs, there was an anomaly. So that REIT and InvITs now becomes in the same way as listed equity shares. So I think REIT and earlier the capital gain tenure was 3 years. Now that comes to 1 year and the rate also changes. So I think overall, I think the second level of change would be in the capital gain, the area of capital gains. The third, foreign companies, I think equalization levy of 2% going away. It came in 2020.
Correct.
Not as part of budget, but it was really later on added. And secondly, foreign company taxation
being reduced
by 5%. So I think that was a big ask from a lot of people. So I think that will benefit a lot of the foreign companies who have branch setups here or who've got project offices here. And I would say fourthly, on the personal tax side, as we had discussed, I think the pivot towards the new tax regime is there. So standard deduction benefit only available to in the new tax regime. There's some changes in slab rates that have happened. I think that's also
only in the new tax regime. That's right.
And NPS also, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that also is probably only in new tax regime. I'm not 100% sure.
Well, on the NPS, she said we're working on the solution and we will arrive at that.
No, she said 10. So what was earlier available to government employees, they could get 14%. And private sector employees were getting 10%. Now both of them go to 14%. So that gets balanced out. So I would say that the tax things I would break into sort of as it on direct tax. If I was to look at it, I would break into 4 buckets. I think a number of tax changes, honestly, after a long time in a budget,
yes, it's been a heavy budget for tax.
For tax. Yeah. I think some, especially on the simplification side, the reassessment piece and everything, there will be. And the big thing, Shireen, I think, as mentioned, I think the government sticking to the macroeconomic stability and the focus on jobs and skilling, I think that's really massive, really bold moves on that, big change on that. So I think government really recognizing that this is a big area to solve.
Yes, it is a big area. It's a big challenge. But Mr. Mukundan, as far as growth is concerned, and many of these measures that we just spoke of, the hope will be that this will provide the stimulus needed to be able to get us to 7% plus. Enough in the budget to deliver on the growth promise.
Yeah, of course. I think what the budget has done is budget has focused on fiscal consolidation on one hand, but has not let up on some of the issues which we need to address if you have to have a long-term growth. One is where Sanjeev said fundamentally on the climate change, how do we make the energy transition? There's clearly a measure of that. There's a measure on R&D. But if you look at agriculture, she spoke about agriculture productivity, very, very important for us for stimulating rural demand. Then the focus on skilling and jobs and internships at the company level, incentivizing it so that we get more people on the workforce. At the same time, focus on MSME and the focus on infrastructure, because if India has got to be competitive, we've got to focus on these 3 factors. And I think all these 3 are welcome factors. One more layer which was added was a look east policy. I think the look east, in some ways, you've got to think about it is to say if India is to have inclusive growth, the eastern part of India needs to also have a GDP growth which is commensurate with its potential. Including agriculture potential in East is far higher than rest of India. And I think getting that focus right is very, very important.
Yes, and of course, there was special mention for both Bihar and Andhra Pradesh, which was the expectation, 15,000 crores in FY25 for the state of Andhra Pradesh for Amravati. And of course, there was specific allocations for the Polavaram irrigation project as well. But on FDI, and that was again, a piece which is work in progress, simplification to bring in more FDI. She didn't specify what the government is thinking of. What would you take away from that?
It was a policy statement. I think the details of that is still to be seen. But I think some of these steps on foreign company taxation, equalization levy are good indicators. They don't apply to investments. They apply to project offices and branches. But I would say that the investors should look at just the macroeconomic thing. The FDI, the fiscal deficit coming down, borrowings coming down. I think broad themes are very strong.
and the broad themes continue to be the focus areas of the government, whether it was the 5 schemes or the 9 priorities. It's pretty much a continuation of what the government has been focusing on, CB. The 2-3 ideas that you like, that you hope the government will build on and will be important from an execution standpoint.
I think one thing which I see having gotten carried forward is the focus on how the private sector is being given space to participate and in the growth story. So there's a lot of now focus on the private sector to come in. There's a lot of space given to the private sector to come in. So it's an entire story of how do we build trust and get the private sector to take the benefit of the incentives being given on jobs, on skilling. So you talk about skill gaps, and you talk about you are not getting people, as well as you're talking about an employment issue. So that's where I see a lot of role which the private sector can play, and I hope that they will. The second part is, very interestingly, I found one of the things that we have talked about in your show earlier is the role of states. While we talked about 2 states, but it has also talked about how it incentivizes states to participate
especially
in the next generation reforms. I think that's a very, very interesting takeaway for me, because we need that to happen. And third, and lastly, is the rural side. I think the focus on the rural infrastructure, when we see the capex and the quality of the capex spent on agriculture, irrigation, I think that would be one of my key takeaways from the budget.
Enough here to drive consumption. I mean, if you move to the new tax regime, the savings account to about 17,500 is what the finance minister mentioned. But do you believe that on balance, with everything that's been put in place, enough to stimulate consumption further?
So, the ultimate solution for consumption is actually what's been done in the past is a virtuous cycle of investment, employment, consumption. And I think that's where the predominant focus of this budget is. And that's what, we've always said that. And we had said that some bit of relief given the context today. So there's been some relief provided in income tax. And I think with the measures that are being taken in agriculture, the measures being taken in skilling, a lot of that should hopefully benefits transfer to the rural area, the investments in infrastructure. I think that should itself stimulate demand. We should also see the lagged impact of all the investment-led growth, because there is there's always a lag between the investment and the consumption coming. With passage of time, I think the benefits of that should start coming in also. And fortunately, the weather gods are still kind so far this year on balance. So that itself should provide a positive for the rural economy. Of course, that's a serious monitorable, because it's difficult to predict today. But so far, it appears to be on a positive compared to the past.
Holding up so far, the weather gods. Mr. Mukundan, before I let you go, in terms of the many measures, and as I pointed out, some are specific announcements, but many will be work in progress, whether at the central government level or in coordination with industry as well as states. Do you believe that, we had the smart city project, for instance. Today, the government is talking about urban cities and, improving infrastructure and so on and so forth, as far as cities with a population of 30 million plus and so on and so forth. So do you believe that, is there a fear or a concern that, we might get lost as far as the execution roadmap is concerned? Intent, strong on intent, but perhaps execution may be a cause for concern.
So I think in terms of making sure our urban bodies are much more, let's say, vibrant, much more able to execute on the ground, I think is one thrust this government has brought on table. But I think it's a work in progress, because at first level, he said go to states, and then when you go to cities, it's one more level below. And I think it's going to be something which both center and state have to work together.
Well, yes, a lot of coordination and collaborative federalism is the need of the hour, not perhaps as much competitive federalism as we've gotten used to over the last few years. But gentlemen, appreciate you joining us. I would imagine that much more will be revealed in the fine print as you go over that. So we will look forward to speaking with you again. But thanks very much for your time. That's the view here. Industry, as always, confident that the budget has put enough on the table to spur growth and feeling good about private investment picking up from here on. The markets at this point in time, it's a 600-point drop on the Sensex. Well, about 575 points drop on the Sensex, and reacting, as we pointed out, to the changes that have come in on capital gains. But the mood in industry continues to be sanguine on balance, as it was ahead of the budget. Tata.
Okay, thanks a lot for that, Shireen. Mood may be positive for industrialists. Hopefully, that will make them employ more people, which is what the CEA and the finance minister seem to want. But there is one issue on which the mood is definitely somber, and it is not just capital gains tax rising on short-term and long-term sale of equity. It is also that you don't get indexation on property that is sold. Say a house which was purchasable in the thousands in the early 90s or 80s would be sold by a person after he retires today for probably 1 crore. Until now, it was indexed. You got the CPI indexed to these 30 years, and only on the balance you had to pay your long-term capital gains. That long-term capital gains has been brought down to 12.5%, but there is no indexation available. Basically, if you sold a 30,000 rupee house for 1 crore, you're going to pay the tax on the entire 1 crore, 12.5%. So there is going to be definitely some problem for real estate guys who are trying to sell new houses, because almost everyone is selling the house to someone who is selling an old house and buying a new property. So there could be some kind of problem for real estate guys. At least the budgets go down.
Lata, which were there. One was, it was not only indexation, there was a reset of the cost. So if you acquired a house 50 years ago, there was a resetting of the cost to 2004 and then an indexation. Indexation is gone. I'm not too sure as yet
About
as to
the
whether
reset.
the 2000 reset also or not.
You know, indexation.
We have to hold on to this conversation.
Indexation versus taxation going down. At the margin, is it neutral? Is it negative? Is it
It
positive?
really depends on how long you have held. If you held it for very long, then it will be negative.
Right. Okay.
I think we have to go to two corporates who are waiting anxiously, and we'll come back to you.
Yeah.
We have Sunita Reddy of Apollo Hospitals joining us, and Mr. H.M. Bangur, the chairman of Shree Cement, as well joining us. Sunita and Mr. Bangur, thank you very much for your patience. We are getting lost in the litany of tax litigation and the fine print, so hence the delay. But Sunita, first thoughts, what have you made? There are some benefits given for R&D, some a basic customs duty on some import of medicines has been revoked or brought down to zero. Your first thoughts on the budget itself?
No, I think it was a good budget, very stable. I really like the focus on skilling and the fact that, for 4.1 crore youth, the government is willing to invest 2 lakh crores. And we can use our CSR funding for internships. I think this will have a huge impact on the healthcare industry, because skilling was something that was much needed in this industry. What you mentioned about customs duty, realization and reduction for, especially in the oncology space, for 3 other medicines, as well as on tubes, I think, is going to reduce the cost of delivery of oncology care. And I think that this is something that is much needed because it's growing at 20%. So it will be very impactful. The third that I wanted to stress on is, they did make some mention about women and creating better workspaces. I think this issue of creating jobs, helping them to stay as working women, even after they have children, enabling them to come back to work is a very important factor in contributing to the GDP of the country.
Most of the tax.
We should really recognize this. With regard to research, even though the allocation was 1 lakh crore, I believe that we're still at 0.7% of GDP. And I'm hopeful that we could work with the government to really increase this from 0.7% to something more meaningful. And finally, I have to say that for the healthcare sector, I think the GST, where we have no set off against the input cost, is something that we need to have conversations with the state and the central government and the GST Council.
On what specifically, Sunita Reddy, GST?
Yes, yes, I think,
No, which
we really
specific-
need to do some. No, I think, for example, for the input tax, GST tax that we pay, 18%, there's no set off. We're in the negative list.
Okay.
So I'm hoping for some rationalization there.
Okay. Yeah, that's outside the purview of the central budget. So
Yes,
it
but
will
she
have to
did
be raised.
mention, she started by mentioning that there will be some look at a GST.
All right. Then that's extremely positive. Hold on, Sunita Reddy, for just 1 minute. Let me invite Mr. H.M. Bangur, the chairman of Shree Cement, as well. Mr. Bangur, again, thank you for coming and thank you for your patience. Well, under the PMAY, there is 3 crore additional houses that are going to be supported with subvention on credit. So more houses would mean more cement. Your overall takeaway from the budget?
Yes, that is right. But more houses means much more jobs. Construction industry is one where the maximum number of jobs are created per unit of expenses. So 3 crore house is the cheapest way to create more jobs. So that has been achieved both ways. Houses are needed here. Yes, please.
Right. Mr. Bangur, do you think, what does the slew of announcements which have come through, does it give a leg up to cement demand as you see it?
Of course, more than 12 lakh, about 11 to 12 lakh crores are being spent on infrastructure. And in the infrastructure, maximum consumption is of cement. And it will be done very fast. Secondly, the road connectivity also leads to cement availability in the rural area at the affordable cost.
Fair point. Yeah, fair point, Mr. Bangur. Just hold on. I want to come to Sunita Reddy also on the point of the extraordinary munificence shown expectedly to the state of Andhra Pradesh. There is going to be a lot of road development, 15,000 crore of additional spend on that state. I'm sure, Sunita, of course, you have hospitals all over the country, but I wouldn't be surprised if you had, a little more of an emphasis in the states of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh as well. What's your sense? Do you see, a greater deal of infrastructure activity in the state?
I definitely do. I think that with the leadership currently in place, with this allocation and the fact that there's a lot of foreign direct investment looking at this state, the signal from the center will only incentivize more investment, including healthcare infrastructure.
Yeah, there is also a lot. I mean, one of the many programs she announced also was industrial development and grants for water, power, railways, etc. There is, the Visakhapatnam corridor as well, which was mentioned. So the backward region of Rayalaseema is going to get some benefits. So all this will mean, of course, demand for everyone. And there is likewise a similar package for Bihar. So, Mr. Bangur, are these centers you sell to? Are these important centers for Shree Cement as well? And therefore, your reaction?
Yes, in Bihar, we are having the biggest factory, and Bihar was having consumption much lower than the Indian average.
Okay.
So even if the Indian average consumption comes there, and with road connectivity, with all these infrastructure and the money available there, because when money is spent, a lot of profit will be remaining with the people of Bihar. We expect Bihar to grow much faster. And moreover, this budget is a continuity not only to be seen for this year, but for next 5 years. It is a groundwork. This year it is Bihar and Andhra. Next year it may be some other states. Now, full India will be developed in fast mode.
All right. Hi, Mr. Bangur, and welcome to the show. This is Nigel on this side. A couple of questions with regard to demand first. Post this, you're sounding quite optimistic with regard to the steps that have taken. So industry demand, what are you focusing on? It should grow by around 8 to 10% for this growth this year, if you could confirm that. And also, would you have some more focus on the green energy side? Because companies like you are putting a lot of money, a lot of focus on that side. Since prices are not moving up, maybe some relief on the cost side?
Yes, 8 to 10% demand growth is expected. And as far as the renewable energy, it is because so many things are being said. One important point of incentivizing pump hydro that has been missed. So a lot of work has to be done and is being done for seeing that the renewable energy remains relevant And if additional energy is produced in the off time, then that can be stored and reused. So the renewable energy is definitely the future.
Okay. The other important announcements in the budget, of course, have been on capital gains. Mr. Bangur, basically, as from a finance standpoint, for a company like yours, are there any differences at all if long-term, short-term capital gains change and indexation of property is gone? Do all these make a difference to a corporate, or is it largely an individual's headache?
It is largely an individual headache. We have to, every time we normally talk about how the collection is made. This time the budget has to be focused on how the spending will be done. There is very little thing has been done, small changes in collection side.
Okay. For
individuals and for the specific cases, it will be big. But overall, it will have not much meaning.
Okay. Sunita, I want to come back to you on that very important point you raised, that all the advantages of skilling and the subsidy given by the government for corporates that have new employees, I think about 1 crore employees at least for the next 4 years. If you can tell us whether this is this will mean what, more nurses, more sub-staff for the hospital industry? How do you see it playing out? And will it make a very big difference in terms of increasing the number of hospitals and help?
No, definitely it will, because especially at Apollo, where we're adding 6 hospitals, at least 2,000 beds, I could quantify the difference, and let me say it's meaningful. So not only from staff that are from the back office to those that are consumer facing, I think this will be a huge benefit for the healthcare industry.
Okay. Now, would this actually make you employ more? I mean, employment is always a budget which you have to keep in mind among other things. But will this be an incentive to employ more people, especially at the new joinee level?
Yes, I think it is definitely an incentive to employ more. But more important is that you have to think of the ripple effect. When you do one healthcare job, there are 4 ancillary jobs that are being created. So the impact on the industry will be large.
Fair point. Sunita Reddy, thank you very much, and for giving us this human welfare angle or skilling angle. Mr. Bangur, similar question to you. Do you think this broadly encourages formalization of labor? There are a lot of lower skilled labor, which large companies outsource to the staffing companies, and not all staffing companies are only looking at formal jobs. Do you think largely formalization of jobs will be increased?
Formalization job is one part, but my focus will be if they are there for 1 year in a big company, first 500 companies, the skill level there will increase tremendously, and they will be fit to be employed anywhere in any industry. So staying with these big companies for 1 year will definitely increase their skill level. And I am focusing on a skill level which is there, which will be increasing. Teaching the skill is best done by practical on-ground experience.
Okay. Any other comments you have on the budget, Mr. Bangur? Anything we may have missed asking you?
Not really missed. Only positive things is that this is the first step of the 5-year term. Lot of things that we are moving towards more on capital expenditure, which means long-term growth of the country. So we feel that short-term small pains will be there. Somebody will be disappointed. This has not been done. But overall, when we see, it is that next year 7.5% to 8% growth also of the country may be expected.
Okay. All right. Mr. Bangur, thank you very much for joining us here. Appreciate your time here. Mrs. Reddy, great to have you with us as well on the program. Sajid, good afternoon. Prashant here. Good to have you back. By the way, have you had the chance to hop over to the on the equity side to figure out what the chatter is like there? Is it a lot about taxation, or what is it?
Good afternoon, Prashant. I'm going to stick to the macros. I think this was both fiscally and financially very prudent, actually.
Okay. No, absolutely. Any finer points that you can tell us in terms of food subsidy, fertilizer subsidy, or the way in which expenditure has been distributed? We only asked you about the broad fiscal deficit, which has come down. But any of the finer points in terms of nature of expenditure?
Yes, thanks, Lata. So a couple of things. We now have some more detail. Remember the deficit, if you compare actuals last year to what's projected this year, goes from 5.6 to 4.9. Now, the good news is that most of this is happening through either asset sales or happening from what I call the non-contractionary component of the RBI's dividend. Because a lot of that dividend came from interest earnings on foreign assets. A lot of that dividend came from FX evaluation. So what's important is to understand when the fiscal deficit is consolidating, how much of that imparts a negative fiscal impulse on the economy, how much of that is going to be contractionary. And the good news is because a lot of the consolidation this year is happening from the RBI dividend, you get a 0.7% of GDP consolidation, but only a 0.3% in terms of contraction. A lot is happening on the revenue side, number one. Number two, I think what you're seeing is the mix on expenditures continues to be healthy. Capital expenditure compared to last year goes up further from 3.2 to 3.4%. Subsidies go down. Revenue expenditure, ex-interest and subsidies, actually goes up compared to the interim budget. So essentially what's happened is the government had about 0.4% of GDP in extra resources compared to February. Half of that went towards non-interest, non-subsidy current expenditures. Hopefully that should boost rural demand, aggregate demand. Half of that went towards fiscal consolidation.
Okay, got that. But from an employment point of view, do you think, you must have just heard Sunita Reddy saying that it gives a huge fillip to the health industry because it is employment oriented and they will actually be incentivized to take new joinees because there is some kind of an EPFO subsidy. The more number you enroll into the EPFO, that is, the more formal jobs you give, there is some 4-year subsidy that is given to those companies. Do you think this really moves the needle on employment and therefore can have multiplier effects?
A couple of things that one is, I just make 3 quick points. One is, as we've discussed before, the key issue for private investment is demand, right? So we have to find a way to boost demand. Now, there is no cyclical space as we previously discussed. Deficits have to come down. Monetary policy has limited room given what's happening globally and with food inflation. So this will have to be, how do you structurally boost demand? And the structural demand has to come either from consumption or from exports. And to structurally boost consumption, you need employment. Now, why are today's measures important? Because, as I've been writing for the last year, if you look at the last 20 years in India, India's manufacturing has been becoming increasingly capital intensive at a time when we're undergoing our demographic transition. So just when working force population is rising rapidly the last 2 decades, capital labor ratios, this is ASI data, have continued to go up. Right? So the whole focus has to be, how do you redress the balance between capital and labor? I think today's steps are an important first step in doing that. How do we incentivize firms to hire more people and undertake less machines? Now, you'll need efforts both on the demand side and the supply side. And we saw some of that today. There are some demand measures for firms. There are some supply measures. Skilling is important. Education is important. To be fair, this is 1,000 small steps, but some really important steps have been initiated. And I think today, the signaling is really important. That the focus in the next few years is going to be on employment, on skilling, on education, not so much on fiscal 0.5% here or there, but on what are the structural measures to redress the capital labor balance.
Okay, point taken. Sajid Chinoy, thank you very much for sparing time in what must be a very busy hour for you with client calls. But the point is that the needle has been moved on where it has to move. And just to add to what Sajid said, we should have been a country where labor has a huge advantage and therefore more labor is employed per unit of capital. What we were actually seeing in India, as Sajid points out, is for every unit of output, we are actually employing more capital than even some of the capital-rich countries and labor-scarce countries. So this capital intensity has to be moved away, and therefore the incentives given to employing more people is in the right direction. Now, how will it play out? Whether people will set up more hospitals will not depend on the subsidy. It will depend on the demand.
Absolutely.
So the point is taken that ultimately the economy has to show that demand growth, but the government has definitely done its job on skilling.
Okay, well, we'll take a quick commercial break here. We'll come back. We'll touch upon individual stocks and sectors which are moving. Ramdev Agarwal, chairman and co-founder at Motilal Oswal, is also going to be with us on the other side. We continue the budget conversation. Stay with us.
Government will implement following 3 schemes for employment-linked incentive as part of the Prime Minister's package. These will be based on enrollment in the EPFO and focus on recognition of first-time employees and support to employees and employers. Scheme A, first-timers. This scheme will provide 1 month wage to all persons newly entering the workforce in all formal sectors. Direct benefit transfer of 1 month's salary in 3 installments to first-time employees as registered in the EPFO will be up to 15,000 rupees. The eligibility limit will be a salary of 1 lakh per month. The scheme is expected to benefit 210 lakh youths. Scheme B.
Okay, welcome back. Markets are down just 75 points. And, it's quite incredible, I have to say. Capital gains taxation, worst fears come true. Market sells off 400 points. And within 2 hours, not even 2 hours, we are basically down just about 1/3% or so. Big recovery. One of the big reasons why that recovery is happening, of course, is ITC. Mangalam is standing by. So there is ITC, where there is no change which has happened, and there are jewelry companies like Titan which are rallying on the back of changes which have happened. Mangalam is here to tell us the exact implications for both these sort of sectors and companies as well. Mangalam, take it away.
Well, from what we know of the budget so far, 2 things are clear. It's a positive for both gold and gold flake. Why do I say that? Well, for starters, Titan is the top nifty gainer because the basic excise customs duty on gold and silver has been reduced from 10% to 6%. And don't just look at it as 10% to 6%. If you take into account the incidence of GST, etc., the effective tax on jewelry actually is down from 18.5% to a little over 9%. So on that ticket size, it makes a very big difference. Remember, this ahead of the festive season and ahead of all the key wedding dates that are there in the second half, more than the first half, is a big positive, especially after a dismal first quarter performance from Titan on account of lower wedding dates and poor consumer sentiment along with rising gold prices. This bodes well for them, as a result of which this is a positive for Titan. More so for Titan than the others is because Titan does not sit on any unhedged inventory on their books. So any reduction in prices immediately benefits them, protects them from any inventory losses as well. The second part, ITC. As always, no change is good news for ITC. But this time around, that was expected. But more importantly, any improvement in rural sentiment would aid their non-tobacco business as well. That makes it positive. What also makes it more attractive is the fact that over the last 1 month, irrespective of the move that we've seen in the stock price, over the last 1 year, the stock is absolutely flat, making it trading at close to around 26 times 1 year forward earnings, which is at a discount to, not only the FMCG index, but a lot of the other tobacco players, which have seen a big surge as well. And finally, we have a big move on both gold and gold flake.
Right. I think we have Prime Minister Modi. Mangalam, thanks for that. Prime Minister Modi on the budget. Let's listen it.
पूरी टीम बहुत-बहुत बधाई की पात्र है। साथियों, ये बजट समाज के हर वर्ग को शक्ति देने वाला बजट है। ये देश के गांव गरीब किसान को समृद्धि की राह पर ले जाने वाला बजट है। पिछले 10 वर्षों में 25 करोड़ लोग गरीबी से बाहर निकले हैं। ये जो न्यू मिडिल क्लास बना है, ये बजट उनके सशक्तिकरण की निरंतरता का बजट है। इन नौजवानों को अनगिनत नए अवसर देने वाला बजट है। इस बजट से शिक्षा और स्किल को नई स्केल मिलेगी। ये मिडिल क्लास को नई ताकत देने वाला बजट